Good evening. I'm going to call the Carson City Airport Authority meeting of Wednesday, January 15th, 2020 to order. And if we could have a determination of a quorum and a roll call, that would be great.
Chairperson Golden,
Here?
Vice Chair Harris,
Here.
Treasurer Rogers,
Here.
Member Barrett,
Here.
Member Hamilton,
Here.
Member Pulley's, Member Simmons.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Fantastic. John Rogers, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay, moving on to approve the minutes of the last board meeting of the Airport Authority. Any members of the authority have any comments on the minutes that were submitted? No? John Rogers? No. John Barrett? You guys good with the minutes? Okay. Anyone want to make a motion to approve those minutes?
I move. Bradley Harris.
And a second? Oh, John Barrett, okay. Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the prior meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Fair enough. Modification of the agenda. The chair reserves the right to modify the agenda in order to most effectively process the agenda items in the meeting, and items may be taken out of order, combined for consideration, or pulled or removed from the agenda at any time. As such, I am moving item number 2 to item number 1 this evening. Item number 1 will be moved to item number 2. So, public comment at this time. This is an opportunity for members of the public who wish to address the Airport Authority on any agendized and non-agendized matters related to the airport. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per topic. If your item requires extended discussion, we can deal with that at a later time. I would respectfully request that if you have any item that is for a agendized, any comment for an agendized item, you wait until the item is called upon and we give you that opportunity for the matter of continuity and clarity. With that said, any public comment this evening? Yes, sir. Could I respect, you have the right to do so, but could I respectfully request that you wait until we address that item, which will be next? Okay? Fantastic. Seeing no public comment, we're moving on to, again, item 2, which is item number 1 now, for discussion and possible action to review and discuss the proposed fiscal 2021 budget and proposed draft airport rates and charges. And so I'm going to defer initially to our manager, Ken Moen, and Airport Authority member John Rogers for their presentation.
Thank you, Chair Golden, and I want to thank members of the Carson City Airport for coming out tonight. I want to say this is the biggest group we've had since I've been manager here. And I think what's awesome about it is everybody being involved in not just the rates to charges, so to speak, but also in the management of the airport and what's good for the airport now and in the future. And so this budget is really what sets the tone for that. The budget is for not just our ongoing expenses, but also proposals for capital improvements on the airport that are not grant eligible, but also for meeting our grant assurances. The FAA grant assurance number 4 says the airport will maintain, the airport sponsor, maintain a fee and rate rental structure, facilities and services at the airport, which will make the airports as self-sustaining as possible under the circumstances existing at that particular airport, taking into account such factors as volume of traffic, economy of collection, and that no federal share of an airport development, airport planning, or noise compatibility project for which a grant is made under Title 49 of the U.S. Code, the Airport and the Airway Improvement Act of 1982. The federal Airport Act or the Airport and Airway Development Act 1970 shall be included in the rate basis for establishing fees, rates, and charges of users of the airport. So I think it's important as a recipient of federal grants that we get that out of the way. When we talk about the 2020 proposed rate structure, I'm not going to touch on the budget at the moment. I think the majority of the people who are here today are here about the rate and fee structure. And I want to add that 90% of what you see on this sheet for current rate and proposed rate is already something that's established. There's two things that two primary issues that we've looked at, but there's about 3 or 4 items that are up for discussion, and nothing's going to be approved here tonight. We're not asking the board to make a vote or approve anything. Our tentative budgets under NRS is due to the Nevada Department of Taxation on April 15th, and the final budget, including a public hearing, has to happen before June 1st of this year. So the purpose of bringing it up here early in the year and early in the budget season is to have a dialogue about that. And it's important to have the dialogue not just with the board, but also with the people on the airport and who use the airport. So I'm going to start at the very top, and I'm going to bring up here on the overhead for the benefit of the community the proposed rate and charge. Now, there's a minor difference to the one that the board has. There's a copy of it in the back of the room. Unfortunately, we don't normally get this many people, so I didn't make a whole bunch of copies. But I can provide a copy to anybody at any time. So with that being said, I'm going to read from here and share with you the discussion. There's a minor difference, and I'll point them out to here as we go. All ground leases are based upon current appraisal. Tie-down rates have been published, and they've been here since before I got here. The overnight rate, and there's a weekly, monthly rate. There's also a rate for parking in the south parking lot of the airport. And the rate we've been working under has been $5 a day or $30 a month. And so if you hit that first 5 days, it automatically rolls into a monthly rate. We currently have 3 people under contract who have long-term agreements to park in the parking lot. In our proposal, we're asking to add a weekly rate in an effort to, as a cost offset. As you know, we did some work to the parking lot this year. It was about a $6,500 bill. And that on the capital improvement plan, there's an ultimate item that will be required at a future date for the replacement of that parking lot when that pavement fails. But if we continue to do our crack sealing and our fog sealing, we should be able to extend the life of that asset. On airport dedicated storage, that's nothing that's currently in existence. There had been some discussion about establishing an area where items that are now either parked along the fence by the porta ports, the vehicles that belong to Cactus Air Force, and finding a location for them otherwise on the airport to free that area up by the firehouse and by the road, as well as people who have trailers or something that there's currently being parked on parts of the airport that aren't authorized to have a location for those. That location may in the future be identified somewhere down to the east end of the airport, but there's nothing in place. But in order to establish that dialogue and have a discussion, we put a proposed fee on that. The terminal building has been used for some activities. Some of those are free of charge. CAP meets in there. EAA's held their Christmas party in there. We haven't charged anybody for that. We did have somebody who at some point in the past was a airport tenant and user, and they had a wake in there, and the family paid $200 to rent the facility. Things that haven't been aeronautically permitted, such as political activity and that sort of thing, we've discouraged from that kind of activity being taking place in the terminal building. Engineering and legal fees that are associated with projects on the airport that are not in the interest necessarily of the airport authority, but in a tenant. We do charge the tenant for a bill back of that fee, whether it's an amendment to a lease and or some engineering work that has been done. And that has taken place in the last year or so. And so that's just, it's not codifying us, but it's putting it on this published rates and charges. Another fee that has been in place for a long time has been the assistance of snowplow operation by airport personnel on private leasehold. We've done that a couple times during the past couple of years, and we bill that at $75 with a 2-hour minimum. So we also added a couple other pieces of airport equipment to that and a similar rate and charge for the blower as well as the use of the tractor. We have a barricade rental on here for those low boys that the airport possesses. We use that in a construction project for new hangars this year, where the leaseholder rented them for the duration of the project to delineate the work area. We have a gate card fee that's been in place for a long, long time. A couple of fees that we've added to discourage basic activity is if somebody wanted printer copying from the general public, we've added a fee for that so that there is some collection. One sheet of paper here, there is not certainly going to make our budget. And a mail service fee is really for the discouragement of having packages delivered to the terminal so that we don't have responsibility for them. I've generally not accepted that, but in order to establish a policy on that, we've added a service fee. Currently, you'll see the FBO fee. That's a Class 2 FBO fee that's currently on Title 19. That's $100 per month. I'm trying to backtrack when that fee was actually set. Title 19 was not developed till 2008. However, earlier records show for the Carson Aviation Services that fee was in place at least in 2006 and probably earlier. I've looked at some of the other leases and there's not a delineation of that in there. The reason that we're proposing a higher fee, I came across some information that may have been set as early as the 1980s, and just in a method of cost recovery and keeping up with the times as far as inflation is concerned, $100 in 1980 is now worth about $20. And I don't know if anybody out here notices that difference, but I certainly have. So that proposal's in there as a method of cost recovery for the airport authority. There's also in there an item listed as fuel flowage. It's currently at 5 cents per gallon, and it's paid by the FBO to the airport authority based on fuel flowage. That is in the lease of the current leaseholder, both for the self-serve and the FBO. However, it is subject to CPI. I'm not sure when the last time CPI was in place on that fee, so there's some continued research. The proposed rate is 8 cents a gallon. There may not be any real method of raising that rate. I'm not sure about that yet. We're still looking at that. I did do a little bit of research with airports in the area, and they range from about 3 cents a gallon all the way up to 25 cents a gallon. I can make that information available to whoever would like to see that. An aeronautical activity permit, an advertising permit, and should be one on there for a business permit. And both of those permits are in place to ensure that we know who's on our airport conducting enterprise and doing business. One, we want to make sure that they're qualified. We want to make sure that they have insurance for their activity. And they also would need to come into the airport, provide a gate card, fill out an application. So that's a cost recovery for that. That all takes time and management. And so therefore, we're proposing a fee of $30 for each of those 3 permits. I don't have business permit listed on there. I apologize for that. That might look like, for example, there is a company that comes on and does snow removal on the airport. And so I had that gentleman provide me his insurance, also provide me his driver's license, and ensure that he's properly permitted business in the city of Carson City. And he purchased a gate card, got the same briefing that any other operator on the airport has or tenant that uses their POV on the airport. We do have credit card processing. That's something that we started at the airport in the last year. We were unable to take credit cards prior to that. It was either check or cash. And so now that we have a fee, we have an expense that's related to that. And so as a cost recovery method, we're suggesting a 3% fee on a transaction. One thing that I've had a couple comments about when this rates and charges information got out to the tenant base was this security fee. And a security fee is being proposed as a cost recovery method, and it is being proposed to individual leaseholders. It's being proposed at $20 a month. Currently, we have a contract for a security firm that drives around our airport 3 times a month. But in our FAA grant project for next year, which is the perimeter fence project, we're also going to be replacing the gates on the airport, and we're looking to upgrade the access control system. If we were a Part 139 commercial service airport like Reno Tahoe, that access control system would be AIP eligible. However, in this circumstance, we're not that, and that would not be AIP eligible. Therefore, to fund that system, we're trying to find a method to do that. When I first came on board here at the airport, the gate card system had an annual fee of $10 to one per gate card, not per individual. And that fee, the board at that time elected not to continue the use of that fee. And those fees were directly going into a fund specifically for the fence and gates. So currently, there's about $22,000 in that fund. I'm working on some proposals for the gate card. I'm not sure what that looks like yet. So that's kind of a placeholder for discussion. With that being said, if you would like to reserve the discussion with the other budget items and the capital improvement and allow for either comment from the board, I'll turn that back over to you at this
Well,
time.
let me, you skipped something here.
What's that?
Landing fees?
Oh, I also in there, I'm sorry, I was reading off the one that I didn't update. That's correct. Thank you for pointing that out. Currently, I've added also the discussion for a landing fee for Part 121 and 135 operators. And there's also a discussion item for the through the fence access fee. Let me elaborate just a little bit on that. In my survey of fuel flowage fees, I also checked with airports about commercial landing fees, and it's about a 50-50 split. A lot of the smaller Nevada airports have fees for BLM for operations on their airport during fire season. Reno Stead's an example of that, and others do not charge a landing fee per 1,000 pounds. Generally, what that looks like is a NetJets, Wheels Up, FlexJet, a charter operation or something of that nature. And so if a Kinger comes in here, let's say he's at 12.5 at a $3 per 1,000 pound, you're looking like a $36 fee. Those fees are generally utilized by the airport as a method of cost recovery for operating the airfield. And so it looks like a little bit of a different revenue stream. The through the fence fee is currently 36 cents per square foot of the existing hangar. Through the fence operators on the airport are currently NDOT, ClickBond, Mustang Aviation are the three that ring my bell off the top of my head. The one next to Mustang, the Barbin hangar, is on airport property. However, we do have a border that we share with 25 acres to the east of Taxiway Bravo, and that property has deeded through the fence access. That came about with a transaction with the Winners Trust, Family Trust, where they donated some land to the airport and asked for future access at the airport. The through the fence fee is mitigated currently by property tax. So if you're a ClickBond, for example, they pay property tax for the hangar. The portion that goes to the city, not the police, fire, and school, the portion that goes to the city currently comes to the airport. Last year, that number was about $260,000. And that goes into our annual operating budget. So it's a big deal. However, what I don't think it considers is the privilege of accessing the public landing area from private property. Currently, Title 19 specifies that all activity that takes place through the fence on private property to the public landing area is going to be incidental to the primary use of that land. What's that mean? What it means is, like for ClickBond, their primary use of that land is manufacturing. They keep and house airplanes in those hangars, so that's incidental. So if somebody proposed, for example, to build a aeronautical use facility on that private land next to us, they have through the fence access deeded rights. So the airport wouldn't be able to prohibit them without having some sort of litigation probably, because we've accepted that land through the deed, but we would like to be able to recover the cost of their use of the airport from private property on the public through an access agreement, some other manner. Currently, the aeronautical use would be prohibited through Title 19, but if that proposed operator went to the Board of Supervisors and appealed to them and they amended the code, then it could be. And that could impact the airport tenants and users for a number of reasons. One, the airport can't establish minimum standards for operators off the airport. They could sell fuel. They could do a number of things that could create problems for the airport and the airport users. So those are open for discussion. How I think this comes out over the next couple months, that's certainly up to our airport community and our airport board.
Okay, well, here's how we're going to manage this discussion. I'm going to give the opportunity to members of the airport authority to speak briefly on this topic. Then I'll give the opportunity to the public to give their comment, if any, to the airport authority, give a chance for the airport authority to respond to any of those, or maybe not respond, and then we can discuss it from there, okay? So, with that in mind, Paul, can we start with you?
I guess some of the things I don't quite understand, exactly what the aeronautical activity permit is, advertising permit, and what the specifics of that is. The airport dedicated storage, as you know, I don't really want to become a storage facility for a lot of things. I could take my trailer that I'm paying $70 a month and bring it into the airport and store for 10, although that is attractive for that. Some of the rate increases, one here, as far as the FBO fee, from $100 to $180 per, I think that's a little excessive. I'm not sure what the fuel flowage fee, 5 to 8, that's quite a jump here. So those are my initial thoughts. I'll be really interested to see what everyone else has to say out there.
Ken, describe to me an example of an aeronautical activity that you are proposing to put a fee on.
You have a permit for it? Well, we have several operators on the airport that provide maintenance services. WB Aviation, Carson Aviation Services, Mobile Aero. Those are three that come off the top of my head. I think Sport Aviation can provide some inspection services for light sports. Is that right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I inspect my aircraft every single day.
But I meant other, for like an annual for a light sport.
Not
Oh,
really,
okay,
no,
all right.
no, I maintain my own aircraft.
Okay. No, but you can do it for others.
I could do it for
Yes.
others if I so wish.
Right.
That's the last thing I want to.
So those operators are on, those operators are on our airfield and pay FBO fees. And so what we want to do is we want to prevent people from outside the airport, off airport, coming to our airport and conducting commercial aeronautical activity without an FBO permit. Now, a business permit allows people to bring they might have a mechanic they've been using for decades, and they prefer that mechanic. Well, that allows them to come on the field, but it ensures the airport gets proper insurance certificate from them, gets proper, to ensure that they're properly rated and certified in that activity. And so what that does is that protects the tenants on the airfield, and it protects the airport.
Could you please talk a little bit about what your vision is relative to an advertising permit?
Well, what we don't want is to have banners either on the airfield or on the fence line that aren't permitted. So if somebody decided they were going to advertise an event, or if they're going to advertise an activity, they could come to the airport authority and apply for a permit. Currently, we have a space out in front of our flagpole where it says Carson City Airport that we allow people to put up. The Young Eagles, for example, has a advertisement banner up there that advertises the Young Eagle activities and contact information. There's no charge for that. And our intent is not to charge for those kind of things. So if somebody wanted to advertise a service that's on the airport and wants to hang a banner, that's what the purpose of that is. And, in order to ensure that the banner's tasteful and meets our criteria of the airport, we're asking to be able to review that in the beginning and at the front end and make sure we approve that, and it's for a limited duration.
Bradley, any comments?
Just a few. First of all, Paul covered a lot of my thoughts, so I'm not going to repeat there. As we go forward, I know it's early in the process. As we go forward looking at the rates and charges, and you've touched on this, Ken, I'll be really interested in the history, and you've brought some of that up, going back and saying, we've been charging this rate for however many years. Okay, that's really helpful. And then some criteria for bringing that forward, updating it, whether we're using CPI or whatever we're doing. Number two for me, and this is actually more important than the history, is any benchmarking we can have in terms of surrounding airports, so that we know where we are competitively with what they're doing. Two other things. One is that when we have these permits, we've got to keep in mind that there's going to have to be an application process put in place for permitting, and there's some work there to be done. There's implementation time, and I don't know how much time. I can't even begin to kind of put that together. But you're one guy, so we have to think about what it's going to take to put that permitting process together, that application process together. And then going forward, there's the administrative part of this. And that's going to absorb some time too. So, I just want to consider how much we can change, how much we can put in place, how much time we can spend on the kind of administrative stuff that's behind this. And then one other piece is, that's sort of the cost side, and then I'd like to have some idea of what the income side is if we make some of these changes, even if it's, a guess, so that we can look at this and say, is that worth it? Is it worth it from an administrative side or from a anger side to do something like that? So those are my thoughts.
Thanks.
Fine.
Yeah, I'm really curious of how this will impact the community that's using the airport, and I look forward to hearing some comments about this. But I am a bit surprised to hear some of the historical background on a lot of these fees and how long they've been standing without any kind of a CPI adjustment. I looked down through here, for example, I know for facilities that I oversee, we're paying in the range of upwards of the $200 per hour for snow removal equipment. So, seeing the fees of $75 just really seems not in alignment with what typical consumers of that type of service have to pay. So I think it's fair to give this a fair evaluation and see if we have outdated ourselves.
Thank you. Many of my thoughts or questions have been asked already, and I am also eager to hear from everybody on the subject. I'm also eager to urge that Ken do everything he can to unearth the historical things. I'll just echo what's been said on that already, because I'm probably the only person up here, I think I am, who has a history with the Airport Authority that goes back to before I was on the Airport Authority, because as a reporter for the local paper, I covered the Airport Authority for 3 years before I ran for Board of Supervisors and became the liaison member to this board. And there weren't many fee changes during this last 7 years. So I'm curious, as you say, if, as I recall it, I bought a brand new car in 1979 for $7,000. If I tried to go buy the same car today, I'd probably pay $45,000. So yeah, we have to, but at the same time, we don't want to impose fees unless they make sense, and we don't want to raise fees unless it makes sense and recovers costs. So those are my only comments.
I take a very different approach to this, and let me share it with my fellow airport authority members. When you want to grow a business, you don't increase fees or institute new fees to tax your existing customers necessarily. You grow your business by growing your customer base. That's the way to increase revenue. I have said this until I am blue in the face, sitting up here on this airport authority. We have given the airport manager direction to grow the customer base. That we said is a critical achievement for management to get to, that we need to grow the customer base. To me, I'm not going to pick on any individual fees but one, which I will address in a moment. To me, the way to grow our revenue is to grow our customer base. The last thing you want to do is alienate your existing customers, and you can do that by arbitrarily raising fees. Now, I'm not saying there shouldn't be some sort of cost recovery, and there probably is merit in many of these fees, and there's probably little to any merit in others. Bradley, no offense to you, but I do want to bring this up because you brought it up about benchmarking against other airports. That is a death spiral for an airport. All the airports around here do that. And what they do is they look at one another's charges. They look at one another's hangar rents. And then they say, oh, well, Reno's charging this. Well, then we can charge that. And all of a sudden, it becomes a game of climbing the ladder amongst the airports to see how fast they can push the customer base out. I've seen this happen. It's not a pretty picture. I don't agree with the benchmarking concept, and nothing personal. I want to make that real clear. This airport is unique unto itself, just like all of the other airports in the region are unique unto themselves. They all have their uniquities. So just because Lake Tahoe Airport charges an enormous amount of money for hangar rents doesn't mean that Minden can get away with the same thing. They can't, okay? And it's really important you don't compare those, because you're not comparing apples to apples. Let me tell you, though, the one thing that I am going to really put my foot down on is landing fees. That's not coming on the agenda. I'm the airport chair. I set the agenda. There will be, as long as I am airport chair at this airport, there will not be any discussion for landing fees. You want to wreck an airport, put landing fees on it. And I'll tell you right now, there's one airport with landing fees, and at that airport, the customers avoid it. They come to Carson City when they don't want to pay. The customers are already paying for the airport. They're paying for the airport in federal excise taxes that come back to the airport in the form of AIP grants. They're paying for the airport in property taxes on their aircraft when they're based here. They're paying for the airport in personal property taxes for their hangars. They're paying for the airport in flow fee when they buy fuel. I don't believe in putting my foot on the throat of the customer and squeezing them for every last nickel, dime, and penny we can get. We must grow our customer base in order to grow our revenues. There's just no way around it. This proposal of fees, with all due respect, and I'm not opposed to cost recovery on a lot of these things. I'm not opposed to charging people parking in the parking lot overnight, weekly, monthly, but some of these things are just non-starters, and it's the amount of money it's going to generate will be lost in the big scheme of things when we alienate customers. With that in mind, let me open this to the public.
Could
Yes, sir.
make a comment before
Go
we
ahead.
open to the public? Okay. Just two things. First of all, I don't like it when a chair says, this is a non-starter, we're not going to talk about it. this board should be open to discussion, and if the discussion is that landing fees are crazy, then it won't be part of the deal. Okay, but to say we're not going to discuss it, it's not even going to make it on the agenda. And I completely get your argument on landing fees. You're probably right, but it's wrong to say we're not going to talk about it because.
I respect your opinion. When you're airport chair, put it on the agenda.
Okay, that's fine then. No, but the other point is benchmarking.
Yes.
Okay? It would be irresponsible to not look at what other organizations charge or don't charge if they're not charging. What I'm saying, and I'm not saying it's an argument for increasing fees. It could actually be an argument for not increasing fees or for not even having fees or even getting rid of fees. But you have to look at what other airports are doing.
I think
it is part of the responsibility of the manager and the board to know what others are doing.
I don't disagree with you. I think, however, you took my comment incorrectly. What I'm saying is I've seen the practice of benchmarking where people jump the rungs on the ladder for the sake of, well, this guy's doing it, therefore we can't do it.
Nothing I said that we would do that.
I'm just
Okay.
pointing it out, that's all.
All right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as far as benchmarking, that's a great idea, but hopefully, we're not going to start benchmarking when, like California is, and get into that situation.
Okay.
I've got a lot of people who are coming here from California, escaping California, because all the increased fees, taxes, this, that, and the other thing, and I don't think we want that here.
Okay, I want to open this. I want to open this up to the public, and being that there's many of you here, I just need to make you aware, we have a strict 3-minute rule for speaking. You're going to have your opportunity to provide public comment, one at a time, please, at the microphone, and either Bradley or I will run a timer. And if you could,
I can do that.
yeah, if you
I can
could,
do that on my.
okay, if you want to do it, I had already set it up for us.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. So, if anyone would like to address the airport authority, make public comment? Okay. Well, we got 2 hands, so go ahead, please. And please, when you do make comment, please address us with your name, where you're from. If you're a hangar tenant here, we sure would like to know that. And again, if you could limit it to 3 minutes, that's the ground rules, okay?
And before you get started and I start timing you, let me just say, what I plan to do is I'll just raise my hand when you're at 3 minutes, okay?
Thank you.
I appreciate that. My name's David Corrale. I am a hangar owner here. We also operate Sierra Mountain Air Park. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, the aeronautical activities thought process kind of threw me and I didn't know what it was, so I looked it up as Title 19 describes it. Any activity conducted on the airport pertaining to operation of aircraft or the safety of such operations. These activities include, but are not limited to, air taxi and charter operations, pilot training, aircraft rental, sightseeing, aerial photography, aerial surveying, air carry operations, ultralight operations, aircraft sales and services, sale of aviation petroleum projects, repair and maintenance of aircraft, sale of aircraft parts, and aircraft storage. Well, I don't think aircraft storage, we're already paying for that because everybody that's got a hangar here or a leasehold is paying something in that regard. And I think if you look at the agreements that have been made with the leaseholders, a lot of these things here that have been proposed as fees, we are already paying for. And up till about maybe 10 years ago, and maybe even longer than that now, maybe 12, 14 years ago, most of the enhancement to this airport with people coming in, building new leasehold, building new hangars, almost ceased to exist. And it was done at a period of time where we didn't have high-powered, high-paid individuals that come from airports that are much larger, much different in operation than Carson City Airport. I think you have to put Carson City Airport in perspective as to what we service and who we service and how we service it. It is a community airport. It is nothing beyond that. The fuel flowage fee, I think, when I look at fuel flowage, if it's a penny or two more here than it is someplace else, when I go to fill up with 300 gallons of fuel, I will go ahead and fill up here. But if it's significantly more, I'm going to go to a place that has better fuel prices. And that's a big piece of business. I mean, we used to have Citation Jet, now we have a Caravan. They all take quite a bit of fuel. And I think you'll find that when you're talking about airport landing fees, that I avoid Truckee Tahoe like the plague. I landed there once, got hit up with landing fees, I will never go back. And it applies to almost every airport now that has a landing fee, I will bypass it. Were you raising your hand? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, and when you're talking about benchmarking, I think benchmarking has a legitimate purpose, but it doesn't necessarily have a legitimate purpose when you're talking about a neighborhood community airport. We're not Minden Tahoe. We don't have the big runways. We don't have multiple runways. We're more like a Silver Springs that doesn't have much of anything. We don't have a restaurant on the field. Nobody was able to make a restaurant a go here. And I believe not too long ago, a lot of users here at the airport provided, thank you, provided money to help offset the cost of the terminal reconstruction, and I don't think that the user should be paying for that unless it is a non-aeronautical activity. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your comment. Appreciate it. You got it?
Hello, everybody, and thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, press the button on your microphone. Thanks.
Like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak.
Your name, please?
Mr. Golden, I think you're right on with your comments, by the way.
Your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Jim Nunley. I'm past president of EAA Chapter 403.
Thanks, Jim.
And we have a wonderful building that Mr. Goldman rents us, and we thank you so much for that. I believe that's you, correct? Yeah. Thank you very much for that. What concerns me is this $200 terminal billing event rent. We've been flying Young Eagles in the 20 years that I've been in the chapter, and we fly every other month now. If that's going to be for each event, we can't do it anymore. We just don't have the money. When we have Young Eagles, the parents come, and it's amazing, so many of them don't even know where the airport is or anything about the airport. So in a very small way, we are helping to present the airport and the good that it does for the community, as well as fly these young kids. And frequently, these young kids go on to college and become pilots, engineers, and other technical fields. So am I correct in understanding that this would be a $200 for
No,
each
you're not
event?
correct, Mr. Nunley. There is no intent whatsoever to charge a terminal rent fee to Young Eagles, Pathways to Aviation, the high schools, any of those kind of activities. This is for somebody who wants to come in and use the facility for other than the purposes designated. Like I mentioned earlier, somebody leased it so they could have a wake at the airport for their family member, as opposed to go leasing another building on the airport. Okay. So we've established that for that purpose, if there's going to be a differential. But as you know, you held your Christmas dinner there in December, and there was no fee charge for that event, nor do we intend to charge one. So,
Good. Okay. Well, thank you for making that clear.
well, I thought I did. I apologize if I did not.
Well, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time.
And I want to clarify one other point, if I may. The landing fee is not considered for any Part 91 operation, which is private party operations. The only purpose it would be ever discussed for would be Part 121 or 135. 121 is scheduled service, and Part 135 is charter. It can be scheduled charter as well. So and part of this discussion is about future business. So if we're going to set and set the bench now for what future activity looks like, we want new entrants to the market to pay current fees. We don't want new entrants to the market paying fees that go back to the 1980s. So in an effort to do that, and I'm sure as a businessman, anybody in here who's a businessman, they're not charging the same fee for their work that they were charging 20 years ago. And so the airport, in a cost recovery method, yes, we collect tax money from property and airplanes. Yes, we collect a fuel flowage fee, and all of those go in there. But if we don't keep it up with inflation, then we're paying today's bills with yesterday's money. It has nothing to do with trying to get in everybody's pocketbook and squeeze somebody for another nickel. We're just trying to maintain pace with inflation. So I hope that I'm making it clear that that intent is not to put the boot on the throat of the tenant or the user. It's to keep the finest facilities that we can in this community. And that is going to come through when we look at the budget and the capital investment programs. The purpose of this fee structure is to put in place a mechanism to get us there. And it's to keep current fees for current rates, and it's to keep activities identified, like protect our customers from people coming on the airfield, working out of the back of their truck, and charging lower rates than other people here that are based on the airport, rent facilities, and pay fees. That's what we're looking to do.
Can we let the
Yes,
public
I just want to
continue?
make that clear.
understood.
That might save some
No, it
some of the
absolutely.
comments.
Other members of the public have a comment, please come up to the table, introduce yourself, let us know who you are, and please share your sentiments with us.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Dale Smith. I have an aircraft that is parked outside on the ramp at Carson City Airport. And Mr. Golden, I'd like to tell you that you're spot on in your comments that you had before we got started. There's so many things that I'd like to say. I'm not sure that I can say them in 3 minutes, but
You can have my 3 minutes.
thank you, sir. I look at what we've got and what is being proposed. There's a lot of intangible benefits that come with having an airport and the services that are provided there. I can tell you that flying in and out of Carson City, I see aircraft that are up here from Minden all the time. They're coming to pick up fuel because it's less expensive for fuel here in Carson City than it is down in Douglas County. When I wind up looking at the budget that is proposed, there's a budget for $60,000 for a vehicle for airport management. Now, I just bought my wife a brand new car, and it was a Toyota 4Runner. Now, the sticker price on that car was about $45,000. When we got finished stickering price, we got it for $36,000. Now, I'm wondering whether anybody at the airport has ever gone out to Fallon Naval Air Station and to DRMO, the Defense Reclamation Management Organization. They've got snow removal equipment, they've got vehicles, they've got air start units and JSU. All these things are available to community airports and public use airports if we're winding up providing any kind of military support. And I saw Army Air National Guard HH-60 landing here not a week ago. Because of that, I actually in a former life wound up interviewing for a job as the airport manager at Saranac Lake, New York. And in doing so, just in the interview, saved the airport $32,000 by telling them that they could go to Syracuse and tell the Air National Guard that they could wind up getting a JSU unit and come in and shoot touch and goes at Saranac Lake. We could be doing exactly the same thing. But keep in mind, because of limitations in terminal procedures for this airport, because of obstacles, i.e. mountains that we've got around us, we cannot wind up having a straight-in approach unless it happens to be a special aircraft and aircrew required approach. We don't train for that in Part 91, and most Part 121 and 135 operations do not train for that either. It would be very, very expensive to have a precision approach coming into Carson City that would wind up being able to provide us with revenue. I'm sorry. Yeah, but we can talk later.
I would really appreciate if you could reach out to me at a later time.
Yes, sir. Will do.
Okay, about the, was it DRMO you said?
DRMO,
Yep, would you please reach out to me?
absolutely. Will
Thank
do.
you, sir.
You bet.
Any other comments from members of the public? Come on up. Again, if you could introduce yourself when you get to the microphone, we'd appreciate it.
Jess Edwards, is it on? Landing fees, you're on. The only place that, well, Truckee has it and Mammoth has it. I never land at Mammoth, because why do I want to pay a landing fee? I want to go in there to eat, and I got to pay a landing fee. Our taxes cover that, it's not. They'll never stop. If you start a landing fee, it's just gonna keep going, and it's finally gonna get down to us little guys, and that's just wrong. We're paying for it. Cut the cost, we need to cut the overhead. Like I say, $60,000 car to drive around the airport, that doesn't make any sense to me. We're not providing transportation for somebody to go home. We're providing a car maybe to go around the airport to do whatever we have to do. FBO fees, $960 more a year. That seems a little bit steep. Parking fee for overnight. I've never heard of that, but one of my customers got charged that. He pays for a month of tie down and he can't leave his car there. And he's gonna pay a $5 fee whether he's inside the fence or outside the fence. That's not right. I've been here since 1988, never had an issue. And now we're gonna charge a guy to use his airplane, go somewhere, and he spends the night and he comes back and he gets a $5 fee for parking his car. That's not right. No, that's all I got right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of the public? Please step up to the microphone and again, address us and introduce yourself.
My name is Joel Allen. We have an aircraft base on the field, and we also have a hangar on the field. So we pay over $4,000 a year on lease rent for the hangar, and then the extra $20 a month for the security fee. You know, when's it going to end? And as for the parking fees, we go in and out of Chico a lot, Chico, California. Leave our car there when we're not there. Leave there for a couple weeks at a time. We've never got a parking fee over there. We rent a hangar over there when we're there and support the local FBO. If you want to get people in, you know, let's work on getting a restaurant, better rental cars. There's ways to get people in here. We go fly to breakfast at different places, and there's nowhere to go here. So if you get people here, good fuel, good places, you know, a restaurant on the field, that would go a long way. That's all I have.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else care to comment? Jess, you already had your comment, I'm sorry.
Can I take somebody else's?
No, no, sir.
Just a minute?
No, sir. I'm sorry.
Hello, my name is Matt Bowers. I'm an airline transport pilot, CFI, IMEI, and all that stuff. I own a hangar at the airport, own an airplane at the airport. I'm a CFI for Great Basin, CFI for Sport Aviation Center. Probably the biggest provider of flight training at the airport, and I fly there 7 days a week. I also work for Sterling Air, repositioning airplanes. At this budget proposal, like everybody else is noticing, it just seems like a lot of nickel and dime additional fees. There was a lot of mention about cost recovery. Most all those increases in fees are not directly related to any kind of costs. Another example is the through the fence fee, recovering a cost for somebody. If I come out of my hangar with an airplane and go flying, is that different than somebody taking their airplane from through the fence and going flying? There's not a cost recovery. There's no additional cost for these people. There's been a rise in the fuel prices over the last 50 years, therefore a rise of fuel taxes. So a lot of the fees we do pay have gone up commensurate with inflation. There hasn't been anything really looked at to lower the cost. These fees are supposed to be offsetting increased costs. Yet we see a $60,000 flatbed truck, a $60,000 airport manager vehicle, of which there's absolutely no need and no purpose for that. If I was the airport manager, I would get in my car and drive around the airport. He's already got mileage recovery for that. There's also an increase in the PERS benefits for retirement, increase in medical. There's actually 2 items for the medical. All these increases for the expenses. Maybe if we didn't waste money, then we wouldn't have to try to nickel and dime all these fees. I fly at Carson 7 days a week as part of my daily flying work. I work with every FBO on the field. And the sole purpose of the airport is to serve us pilots. That's the only reason it's even there. Part of this service that we also need, besides the runway, we need FBOs there. We need maintenance, we need fuel. And raising the prices on the fuel, doubling or almost doubling the FBO fees, that's just gonna drive FBOs away from the field. All the FBOs I know, or almost all of them, are barely getting by. And the increase their fees so much just doesn't really make any sense. We actually need more through the fence, more FBOs, more support here. And I know several pilots in the last couple of months who've left and moved over to Minden. I've also known a huge, can I have 10 seconds to finish the sentence? Thank you very much. Additionally, I've noticed a large decrease in friendliness at the airport over the last few months, and this has caused some other people, a lot of people anger, and some people to leave the airport. Thank you.
Any other members of the public care to comment this evening? Yes, sir.
My name's Dave Hanst. I've got a hangar out here. I've been, yes, I pay land, lease, property tax with the fuel. When I buy fuel, I do my maintenance here for my aircraft. And I've been here 17 years. I got to agree with his last comment that the vibe around the airport in the last 6 to 8 months has changed significantly, and a lot of people are not happy with it. It was a great community airport. Everybody got along. Seems like some of the problems that are popping up now are problems that didn't exist before, or they're solutions looking for a problem. A couple of the costs you talk about, upgrading the security gates, I don't think that's an issue at all, or they work fine, not a problem. Some of the budget things already mentioned were exorbitant in my mind with a couple of vehicle costs. The security fee, it's a gated community when you think about it, and then all the hangars are locked. We've never had any problems with people breaking in, so I don't see what a security fee, I don't feel insecure right now that I need more security. I don't think that that's an issue. So I would like to urge upon all of you, and I appreciate the time to talk, that we keep this a community airport that serves the community at large and not drive people out. Before I came to Carson, I was in Minden, and the Douglas County politics at the airport were so bad that I left, and I lived in South Lake Tahoe, and I'd drive all the way to Carson to avoid that and get back to going to the airport to have fun and enjoy aviation as I see it. And I was a professional aviator. I just retired, and almost 50 years in aviation. So I've seen airports changed with one or two people and get the whole atmosphere of the airport get destroyed by either people overreaching their authority, making it too bureaucratic, or the fee structure is getting so high that people leave and go somewhere else. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Baird. I'm current EAA chapter president. I'm also Aero Squadron member. My big concern here was the terminal building event rent, that's been solved. But security fees are still an issue. We still rent hangars. I rent a hangar. If this goes up, all of our rent's gonna go up. The one thing I do want to remind people, and I think it's been touched on here, is that some of the biggest assets you have here are your pilots. If they have a good respect for the airport, they're gonna spread the good word. If we start annoying the pilots, the good word is gonna stop going out. Bad comments go out a whole lot faster than good comments. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman and Board, my name is Steve Lance. I'm part of the Carson Air Group Hangar 4. 20 years ago, we formed the Carson Air Group under the Nevada Common Ownership Act. We are a condominium association. I believe we're the only one. Is that right, Steve? Yeah.
There's several.
Are there?
There are now several condominium associations, but you were one of the first.
We were the first, okay. We have had great officers in our association through the years. We've provided our own security, and that we have security on lamps, lights on both sides of every hangar on all our taxiways. And those lights are on from dawn, not dawn. God, I sound like Joe Biden, I'm sorry. From dusk till dawn every day. In 20 years, we've never had a break-in or a problem with, and we are definitely opposed to any security on the airport. The last security, quick story, in my hangar, we had 2 airplanes. We were building a hangar. We had security on the airport. The guy kept driving by at night. We'd have the hangar door open, summertime, great time to be out there. And finally, I went out and asked him, why are you driving by my hangar, eyeballing my hangar every night? And he said, well, it looks like you have a boat in your hangar. And I said, well, what's it to you if I do, even though I didn't? It was an airplane we were building. And he said, well, my boss told me to look for boats. They're not legal in hangars. So now with the stopping, coming through the gates, I've been driving through those gates, well, there weren't even gates, for 40 years. And I'm getting used to stopping, but occasionally, I'm coming through the gate, rocking out to Rush Limbaugh's theme song. And I run through the gate and don't stop. And I'm really worried about the new security people sitting at the gate waiting for me to come through. Their job should not be to go after the hangar owners on the field, and I would hope that that's not going to be the purpose of these new security people. So, thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Leach? Green light, press it again. There you go.
My name is Eric Leach, Laetsch. I've been involved with this airport for over 30 years. I was one of the first people to buy a hangar at this airport. I've owned multiple hangars, multiple airplanes. And I'm sorry to be here talking to you again. I want to focus just on the security fee, I believe it's called. To be clear, is that per lease or per building, per hangar?
The proposal's per lease.
Therefore, if an organization has 19 hangars, it would just be $20 for that entire organization?
That's correct.
That relieves some of my concern. But not all. Many of us in this room are referred to as tenants, which is literally accurate. I think it helps if we also recognize that they're hangar owners. Millions and millions of dollars have been invested in this airport to build the hangars that are owned on leased land. Those of us that have owned hangars are paying for this airport. And we have things called contracts, written leases. I'm very concerned with a precedent where there would be a surcharge added to our lease. Whether it's $20 for 19 hangars, $20 for 4 hangars, $20 for 1 hangar. There's a precedent that concerns me. It's not the $20. Having a label on it, security, sounds good. If we're going to start having surcharges on our leased hangars, next year, what will the increase be? And what will the comfortable label be? The next time the airport overall management screws up, which happens around here with some regularity, and more money is required, are we going to have hangar assessments? Precedent. Let's not be having surcharges on our leases. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Is this on? Okay. My name is Rick Freewart, and I have no airplane, I have no hangar. I haven't been to prior meetings, and I haven't reviewed the budget and anything like that. It's my first meeting I've attended here. I live about half a mile north of the airport on Gonai Road. We moved here about 15 years ago, and I was concerned about buying that property because of the airport being here and noise and all those kind of things. There's not much noise, but what there is a bunch of T4s and B-51s and things that I can show my kid and be proud of because this is a treasure, this airport. I think that what you're doing in terms of growing the airport is a great thing. In terms of addressing costs are a great thing. Keeping costs down for the individual pilots is very important because I attend the EAA. There's a lot of people that are older in the EAA right now, flying planes out here, owning planes, costs going up with landing fees, things like that are important to them. I think if you run a business properly, you keep it in the black, having costs that are below normal or regular or whatever you want to call it, standard, is okay. Loss leaders are okay. Bring people in. That's a way of growing business, isn't it? Okay, so I like that idea. My concerns here in the area are possibly shrinking number of pilots as they get older, as you raise costs, as they age out. You can't grow the business if people are going away that way. So growing the business is a big deal, and I appreciate hearing that that's a target. I'm concerned that if we have big planes coming in here and changing the nature of the airport, maybe that's a thing. I have to follow that. I have no idea. I haven't read things like that. So that's a bit of a concern to me, especially if they involve the 737 MAX. And lastly, years ago, I lived in northwest suburban Chicago, and they have a little airport like ours there called Palwaukee Airport. And they have a restaurant on site there called the 94th Aero Squadron. And if you have never been there, you need to fly there as soon as possible because it's a phenomenal, phenomenal place. They have little bunkers where guys they make it look like guys had little trenches. They have little outdoor speakers playing Lily Marlene and other World War I things, and it's absolutely phenomenal. You put anything remotely like that here, people will fly from many states around to get here, and that's a way of growing business. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the public? If not, I'd like to kind of wrap this discussion up. Anyone? Yes.
When you present a problem, I'd like to always present a solution. In my experience with Ken, he's very approachable. Obviously, I'm sure he's got his ears ringing tonight. He's heard that this is not going to work for a lot of us here, what he's proposed. So I'm going to say, let's try to make this positive and maybe come back to the drawing board and get a solution that we can have a great airport, because this is a great community. My husband has an airplane there. We hangar there with George, and we, as Ken mentioned before, in different emails, we're in a great location. I love Carson City. I'm from the East Coast, moved here 16 years ago. We have a lot of great things. We're near Tahoe. Let's make this a great airport. I love flying places to go for breakfast. I would love people to fly here. Let's work on that. Let's turn it around and make it positive. Let's go back to the drawing board. Thank you.
There we go. I just want to,
Your name, please?
Frederick Webb, been flying for over 49 years. I just want to establish, because I couldn't really determine from the paperwork, all of these ideas came from who? Ken, are they all your ideas?
Yeah, I'll take credit for,
100% of them?
yeah, I'll take credit for presenting the proposed rates and charges, yeah.
Because I didn't know where they came from. Could you give us a little background of your history before you came to Carson? Just briefly, what's your history for the last 3 or 4 years?
If you could, instead of ask, I got to be fair about this and equitable. That kind of deviates, goes off the reservation on the topic. If you could keep your comments addressed to the topic, that would be fantastic. It's not a time to ask Ken questions about his background.
Okay, so I asked the question of where the ideas came from, so I just wanted to get established of what kind of ideas, where did they come up? Why did they come up? They're his ideas.
I can answer that in a very general manner.
Okay.
It's my job to propose a budget to the airport board. And the budget is in a couple phases. One, the rates and charges, including some of the new proposed ones, is required by our grant assurance.
I understand what
So
your
that's
responsibility
the
is. I just
purpose.
wanted to know your background from
Well, you asked
why
me a
you came up with
question.
the ideas.
You asked me a question about why I came up with these ideas, and I'm going to answer you. And so when we do the budget, obviously, we have to balance it, and there's obviously things that we look at as whether or not they're good investments for the airport or not. And so by proposing it and putting it in front of the board and to the airport community, we get to hear that feedback. And that's the purpose of it. So when people come up here and they talk about the certain items, we now know. Where if you didn't come in before, we don't know. So yes, there's been a lot of discussion about different fees and whether or not that they're appropriate or whether investment in certain areas are appropriate. But that's why we do this, to have
Yeah,
that discussion.
that's not really answering my question.
Let
I already
me
know that.
take a
Thanks.
stab at it instead of you corresponding with staff, okay? A lot of these fees can be found at other airports. I've seen them. I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not taking any opinion or giving any opinion on them. I'm just saying these are generally found at other airports, and that doesn't mean they're ubiquitous. You could go to an airport, find a few of them, and some of them, Ken is correct. Some of these are cost recovery. For example, printing. That's a cost recovery.
10 cents a page would be good, $1 a page is stupid.
Well, sir, with all due respect, I don't want to address what's smart or not, okay? We're not here to have that discussion. Again, if you could keep your comments focused on, the charges themselves that are being proposed, that's the discussion we're having.
Let's see, okay, so the charges of $1 a page, that's a fee. $1 a page is excessive, 10 cents is more in norm.
Okay, that's a good comment.
Okay, thought I said that, but anyway, I just wanted to know what his background was. I don't think I'm gonna get it in this session, but I'll find out later. Thanks.
And you know what you could do is you could stick around until we take a break, have a conversation with Ken.
I will, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members of the public?
Hi, I'm Dee Freewert, and I am with EAA. I run a number of programs for youth, and I'm always very appreciative of being able to use the terminal building and some of the grounds to do my activities. Sometimes I ask some extraordinary things, and Ken has helped me out. I asked him if I could decorate the terminal building with university students, and he allowed me to do that. So for me, I think there's a lot of benefits for being in this small airport and having the support from Ken. I do want to make sure, though, that whatever changes we make, we keep everybody happy at the airport. So when I have my youth interacting with the EAA pilots and other professionals, other retirees, I want them to exchange stories about being at a wonderful airport, exchange stories about their experiences being on the airport. I don't want them to be grumpy and not be in the same room with other people. I want everybody to sort of harmonize. So my selfish goal is to make sure that the folks that are interacting with the youth are happy where they are and that they're going to be there, because the journey to get a youth through a private pilot program is long and expensive. So some of those comments about it's expensive to be in aviation, if we can do anything at all to help curtail that while I'm trying to season these youth to take interest in aviation and aerospace, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the public? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call for a 5-minute recess. I'd like everybody in this room, that includes members of the public, to come back in 5 minutes. What time is it, Bradley?
It is approximately 6:49.
So let's reconvene here at 6:55 so that you can hear feedback from the airport authority members based on what they've just heard. We'll reconvene at 6:55. Thanks for doing the timer. call the meeting back to order, please, so if you could all take your seats.
It's 57, come on.
Okay, yeah, we're waiting for two members of our staff. Oh, Ken's coming back. Okay. Again, I want to give my counterparts on the Airport Authority a brief moment to comment, and then we need to move on and let John present the proposed budget, because that's part of this discussion too. So, John Barrett, we'll start with you, sir.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody who showed up tonight. I've been around government my entire life, and I love to see it when people are passionate about what they care about, whether I agree with them or not. I have former newspaper man and wire service employee who has been watching like a fly on the wall much of the last half century, and I either made a mistake or got lucky and won a seat on the Board of Supervisors, which puts me here as the liaison from the board. It's great to have feedback because sometimes you're just shooting in the dark if there's no feedback. My earlier comments about fees that we have had in place that need to be updated because of the passage of time and inflation, I still feel strongly that's the case. Government from some quarter has to fund itself, or it maybe should go out of business, and some of you might agree with that. But we're in a service business in reality. But at the same time, you can't get blood from a turnip or from a rock, and you can't go about trying to get it by increasing fees. I would agree with the idea that though I don't agree with our chairman that we shouldn't necessarily discuss it. He has strong feelings on that subject. I have strong feelings that we should discuss anything. I tend to agree with him that landing fees aren't probably the best thing on this group of proposals, and they aren't pinned down what they would be. They're just a question mark there. Regarding some of the other fees, if you feel you're being nickeled and dimed, that is a problem, and I don't want you to feel that way. And I don't want people to leave because they feel that an environment is changing. I have learned in 77 years of existence that the only constant is change, and we're going to have to do something to help, because this airport authority has run on a wing and a prayer as much as anything else. It's true that the people who are on the airport own the hangars, and it's true that they lease the property from the city through the airport authority. I've been an advocate for staying in line with the FAA's requests or demands, or however you want to put them, because they provide 95 or 94 cents on the dollar for all that pavement that's out there and other things. So that's my main goal. I agree we should grow the airport and not try to overcharge for anything. This, of course, is budget, is outgo, revenue is income, and you have to match the two. I think we can do that. This is just a first proposal, so I'm really glad you came out and gave us your opinions on it, because we've got a long way to get to the other end of this, 5 or 6 months in many ways.
Glenn?
I would like to just reiterate also and say thank you guys for showing up. I've been on the board for not too long, a little less than a year, and this is a tremendous turnout. This is a community airport, and you guys are representing the community as you come in here and speak, and you're doing things that like educate myself as to what your views are. And the board is trying to make decisions every month to benefit the community. That's you guys. I would strongly encourage you to not just make this a one-time event, but continue to be involved. This is your airport. This is the community's airport. So in past meetings, I've been quite surprised actually that very few, if any, are in the community to give us feedback and guidance on what the community's desiring out of this airport. So thank you for showing up tonight and educating me. It helped me in vote when times come to try to represent you. And so continue that. Thank you very much.
Bradley.
Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is I'm glad you're here. And the second thing I want to say is, would you please keep coming? Truly, we've had meeting after meeting after meeting where there wasn't a single member of the public there. So now we know how to get your attention. All right? We do it with a sheet that says proposed rates on it, okay? Well, first of all, I want to say that that's probably, the use of the word proposed was probably going a little farther than we had intended. These, as I see this is sort of a list of possibilities, not a proposal. Proposal comes later. But I want to quickly list off what I heard in terms of, the opposition to things here. One was parking, that people shouldn't be paying for parking. Particularly if you are a tenant, or should I say a hangar owner or hangar leaser, that you shouldn't be required to pay for parking because you're already here. And I hear that. I mean, that makes some sense to me. The landing fee clearly is not popular. I would also say that I don't think you should have any fear of it ending up on the agenda because it obviously would be voted down. Okay. I heard about printing and copying costs. I heard about FBO fee. And I have to say there's some history there that we've got to look into, and I don't want to put anybody out of business. I don't want to make life harder for anybody in the airport. At the same time, we do have a responsibility to operate this place to the regs, to operate it safely and securely. And we're going to do that. And if it requires some changes in fees, we're going to have to do that. Okay? And it may be the FBO is one place we look. And it could be that we have a stronger argument for that because we haven't changed it in an eon. So I want you to know that's kind of my thinking on that is, we got to look at what's reasonable. And it may not be unreasonable because it's been so long since it's changed. I heard about fuel flowage fee. Under the current arrangement, I can't see how that, and having discussed some things, I can't see how that we could change that. Okay, it's sort of it's already in a written agreement. I can't see how we could go from 5 to 8. I think that would apply to other suppliers, not to current suppliers. I heard about aeronautical activity permit, advertising permit, maybe, I don't know how people feel about that. And the in-terminal advertising board, and these are some administrative costs that I'm concerned about here, whether we could actually do the permitting properly and do the application process properly. I talked about that before. And there was also discussion of security fee. And I got to tell you, I don't know what's right there. My concern is that we fall down on the security side of things, something happens in the airport property, and then we have to look at ourselves and say, we just weren't responsible as members of the board. At the same time, maybe what I heard tonight is right. You know, we're responsible for our own security of our own hangars. Maybe the charge is wrong. I don't know. But those are the things I heard tonight. I heard you. I know everyone else heard you. I kept a list. If there's anything else that you object to, please let me know. But I also want you to know that there are probably going to be some changes in fees. I hope they're not big. I hope they don't make anybody leave the airport. But in the end, we've got to balance our budget. Thank you.
John?
I'd like to echo everybody else's comment about thank you and thanking the public for coming out. My background is as a supplier to the aerospace industry, manufacturing. That's my background. So when I get involved in discussions like we're having tonight, my thought process goes back to a business thought that I think is absolute and has never failed me so far, and that is any business either grows or dies. There is no option that says that we stay the same. That's death. Growth is mandatory, or else the business cannot prosper in the long term. So I have no interest in being a part of an airport that says that we want to just stay the same as we are, because I think that's a death sentence. I think that Ken has presented himself as an agent of change at the airport, and I think that agents of change are reviled everywhere they go. Nobody likes an agent of change. But I think that Ken has a vision for the Carson City Airport that does involve some change. And I think that that's been stated is part of the strategic planning process. What I saw come out of our strategic planning process, and I'm slightly disappointed that nobody showed up to participate in the creation of the strategic plan for the airport, because that sort of sets the tone for the discussions that we're having tonight. But the words that keep coming up, and they come up especially out of Ken's mouth, is he wants the Carson City Airport to represent itself as an airport for the capital of the state of Nevada. That we are recognized as being a critical part of the infrastructure of the capital city of the state of Nevada. And I think that what that vision includes is opening ourselves up to the larger community, not being strictly an airport that serves a static interest. And I also am not sure that this is where we want to head as an airport. I think this is a point of discussion. But I think that one thing that could identify us as an airport that is, an integral part of the infrastructure of the capital of the state of Nevada is that to have regular service, scheduled service flying in and out of the Carson City Airport. And I think that if that is where if that becomes part of our plan for change and growth of the Carson City Airport, that we do have some facilities issues. I think that if we were to have a regularly scheduled carrier coming in out of the Carson City Airport, they would expect the facilities to be a little bit, I'll say, more updated than what we have currently. So what I see is grow or die. Growth may include a need for us to upgrade our facilities. If that's true, then I think that we got to pay for that. And I think that discussion is part of what caused Ken to issue a proposed fee structure. So, join the conversation. I am a grow or die guy. You know where I stand. But I am wide open for this to become a community-led effort to decide whether we want to grow or die, and if we're going to grow, what that looks like. And so I would strongly encourage you to spend time coming to this meeting, but also to spend time wandering over to talk to Ken if you haven't already done so, and talk about a vision for the future, what that means to you, in enough detail so that Ken can, become an agent of change that is supported by the community and doesn't get too far ahead or out of line with where the community wants to go. He needs as much feedback as he can get to be a good agent of change. But don't vilify him too hard for being an agent of change. I think that is a role that's underappreciated in many organizations, and I think it's a role that deserves to be supported.
Thank you, John. Paul?
Well, as most of you know out there, I'm a familiar face. I'm operating the airport every single day. And I will have, the bad news is what we had to say to Ken is that go out, figure out how to generate income. Well, this is one of his proposals to accomplish that. So, and what really counts is what everyone's showed up and said. It matters. It helps me represent you, and of course you know that I represent you because I'm out there every day flying, and I appreciate everyone coming out here, and I see almost every face out there is very familiar, and I greatly appreciate that. And one thing also is that trying to reduce our overheads, the FBO fee, again, I pay FBO fees, and right off the bat, trying to double that, I think, is way out of line. Some of the other fees, I guess we'll see, but what everyone's done out here has really helped us and directed us on how we're going to go in the future here. So we really appreciate that.
I'm going to try to keep my comments as brief as possible on this matter. Ken took a lot of incoming flack, I think, tonight, and some of it unwarranted. Some of it could have been better if the verbiage in some of this was more clear. For example, when Ken was talking about parking, I'm sure he was talking about transient parking, not people who have hangars on the airport. The common, I'm making a comment, please refrain, okay? The common practice at airports is if you have a hangar on the airport and you need to leave your car in the airport lot, you don't get charged. That's very common. Transient is a whole nother discussion. I'm still trying to get my arms around why there would even be a security fee. I didn't even know until this evening that we had any sort of a private security firm on the airport patrolling. And quite candidly, this gentleman here who's a member of the Carson City Sheriff's Department Aero Squadron, maybe what you could do on behalf of the constituency is talk to your counterparts in the Sheriff's Department, ask them if they would put a patrol as a regular beat to the airport. That's pretty common at a lot of airports. Okay, well then I'm speaking. Yeah, understood. I'm just speaking to y'all then, okay? And I don't want any applause when I say this next comment, so please, I really don't, because this is a serious matter, and I just get irked over this, and I want to tell you why. It has to do with the landing fees. And Ken had good meaning to put something on the table to discuss. I don't knock him for that at all. 13 years ago, my company, which I founded, took over an airport that had landing fees. And the traffic at the airport had all but been eradicated. In particular, the light aircraft, the piston aircraft, was virtually non-existent. And over the years, what had happened was the landing fees, which were initially placed there for the purpose of airline traffic, because the airport thought, gee, there's a great revenue stream, we'll charge the airlines. And that's what happened. And airport managers changed, and it was initially pitched as, well, this is only going to be for the airlines. Management changed over the years, and the governing board changed over the years, and by the time we got there, everyone down to a 172 was paying a landing fee. A Cessna 150 was paying $15 to land at the airport. And we were tasked with turning around the ship. And the first thing that I did as owner of the company, day one, hour one, I eliminated the landing fees for all light aircraft. Gone. Just absolutely wiped out. Now, the problem with landing fees is it becomes a slippery slope. And I'm speaking not to you folks out there, but to my counterparts here. One day, Ken isn't going to be here, I'm not going to be here, Bradley's not going to be here, and the intent that Ken has is to charge 135 and 121 operators landing fees. One day, we're all not going to be here. We're going to move on to other things, and we're not going to want to be here. And the people who are running the airport are going to see that there's landing fees, and they're going to come up with this brilliant idea that, hey, let's charge everybody over 6,000 pounds a landing fee. Or maybe it will go to, hey, let's charge everybody a landing fee, period. Or how about this one? Because this is a real deal that took place yesterday at an airport. The airport that I'm referring to is local. Not going to say where because the decision wasn't made, but it was a proposal that all helicopters pay a landing fee to land at the airport. And the problem is, once the tax is in effect, you can very rarely ever get rid of it, and the original intent is soon forgotten, and all of a sudden it applies to everyone. That's why I want each and every one of my counterparts to know, that's why I am so vehemently opposed to that concept. To me, that's as, offensive as use fees, which I know the pilots in this room know about use fees. It is that offensive to me. We're already paying for the airport. And one day, when you put a landing fee on, one day that landing fee gets applied to everybody who's using the airport. So I just wanted to make that real clear. I heard some comments about people who are leaving Carson City Airport for Minden, or they're gonna leave for Minden. And I say, good riddance. We're trying to do a damn good job operating this airport. And I can tell you from firsthand knowledge of how Minden is operated and why Ken went to the effort of at least putting something on the table here. The airport in Minden has some severe financial distress. In fact, right now, the AWAS in Minden is inoperative. And in fact, the AWAS has been inoperative in Minden for months with no end in sight. There is no AWAS. For those of you who don't know AWAS, it's the weather reporting system. Without the AWAS in operation, guess what? You're limited on your instrument approaches into the airport. So while everybody is upset over proposed new fees or increased fees, keep in mind we have to remain fiscally solvent, have to keep financial reserves in place so that we don't end up being a Minden where the airport literally can't afford to pay for the AWAS to be repaired, and it is still inoperative. So, the other thing I want to impress upon, again, members of the airport authority when we have this discussion, I think when you talk about fees and charges, and this is a general matter, that's all it is, I think you have to look at what the airport has to offer. And I think that the more management works hard at growing the customer base, and the more we bring in more customers, the more we add more services, the more palatable it becomes to increase certain fees. If we had an ILS, for example, it might be more palatable to people. Hey, we got an ILS. Yeah, we need to, pay a little something for that. If we had that nighttime approach in effect, that adds value. When we add value as a group, as an airport authority, when Ken adds value as manager of the airport, these kind of things become overlooked very quickly. Right now, we don't have that infrastructure in place. We don't have a big enough customer base that can absorb these kind of things so readily and palatable. And it appears as if we're trying to balance the budget on the shoulders of our hangar owners. So those are my comments. Thank you. And I have to, by law, ask if there are any further members from the public on this particular topic. Okay, seeing none. Did you want to say something, Ken?
I do. And,
Yeah.
And I absolutely want to echo the board's comments. Most of the time, we're sitting here talking to ourselves and maybe the reporter from the Nevada Appeal. So if anybody thinks that I was upset by comments tonight, you'd be mistaken. Because I absolutely want that kind of feedback. And my door has always been open for anybody to walk into my office and tell me what a crappy job I'm doing, or even give me a pat on the back occasionally. And do not feel unafraid to do that, because otherwise we look at each other and think we're doing a great job. And I want to confess one minor thing here, and one of my confession is that there is a method to the madness. There is a method to put something out there that you get a response at, so that you can engage in a dialogue. When we have the strategic plan, we surveyed everybody. We sent out a Survey Monkey. We got response back from probably a couple hundred different people through the city. But we sat in here and talked about what our plan was for the future, and we had an airport master plan meeting. We hired a consultant through an FAA grant. We invited people to come out, and nobody showed. Maybe a handful. I can count them on one hand. So when you do this and you invite people to come in, you have to have a method to do that. And don't misunderstand me. I didn't do this to just tweak your nose so you'd show up and say Happy New Year. I did this for the purpose of generating a dialogue with the people on the airport, so that we're engaged in the airport. And you're right, one day I will not be here, and you'll still be here, or your kid will be here, or somebody else will be here, and they'll be able to say, yeah, I remember when that was talked about. And we can all go back and look at our records, and we can and know that we did something together in building the community. That master plan is a 20-year outlook. The strategic plan is a 5-year outlook. Right now, we're talking about a one-day outlook and these fee and budget structure. So I do thank you very much for that. And any misunderstanding or typo or lack of clarity or bad idea is all mine. And I brought it here for our open discussion today, and we got exactly what we ordered. And I hope that you're here next week or next month, and I hope you're here the month after, and that you're involved in this budget process and in the future discussion of what we want to do at the airport. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate it. We're going to continue this exact topic because it falls under it, which is the budget. And I think, Ken, should I be deferring to John Rogers on this as the treasurer to talk about the budget, or?
I'm happy to do the highlights of it, because
Yeah.
what I want to do now, this is just a rough sketch. There's some pieces missing, but go ahead.
Okay, and I have a point of clarification that needs to be answered here on this budget. So this is just a draft budget, correct?
It's a very rough draft.
Right, and there's no action that we're taking.
Nope.
Okay, and it is strictly for discussion purposes, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to know where we're at.
Correct. No,
Okay.
you're absolutely right.
Okay, I just want us to know, everybody here, where we're at. So I don't care which one of you gentlemen wants to lead the discussion. One of you take it. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, what, the budget that's in your printed packet, there's been a couple of modifications in that, so, yeah, that's, I was trying to get it up there. It's actually on a different file. Let me do that real quick. this draft does a look back of the last two budgets that were done at the airport, and then does a draft look forward in 2021. And ultimately, what John and I, Chair Rogers and I have discussed, Treasurer Rogers and I have discussed, is how any proposed fee looks to the budget going forward, but also how the actuals look. And we'll talk about the actuals when we get into our financial. This is just a tough thing to get it all up here at one time, so I'm going to just highlight and scroll down. So in the income side, on the top part, under airport leases and real property tax, in 1920, we budgeted $245,000 in income. We usually don't get that number until about June from the county assessor. And so it was like $263,000 this year. I'm budgeting $250 because you do have a decrease in assessed value every year. So I don't want to come out there with a big number that we rely on and then it's insufficient. Under leases, the one hangar that we do lease is the Shade Tree. So that there's a built-in CPI adjustment into that lease every year, so that's accounted for. The land leases are similar. There's about half of the leases are on CPI every other year. So every year we get a new group that gets a CPI adjustment. This year was 4.1%. The tower leases are the cell phone towers that we have. They have a built-in CPI adjustment that's annual. There is a potential of having a third set of equipment up there on that tower this year. It's predicated on one of the current occupiers to move their equipment up higher on the tower and then the other one come into their location. So that, if that was the case, that would generate another $25,000 a year. The Maze / Gonai lease are prepaid leases, so those are just the amortized amounts over the period of time. So that column total, subtotal is $255,000. If you come down to the next area of income, we have tie downs, long-term parking, that's vehicle parking, through the fence fees, which as you see, they're zero because they're offset by the property tax that they pay. So the only time that would be different is if they just had an airplane that was parked out there on private property, accessing the public airfield. There's a fee structure for that in Title 19. We don't have that scenario. So on this case, it's really going to be a zero almost every time. Now, I am of the opinion that through the fence access should be viewed as a privilege to access a public facility like an airport from private property, but that can be reserved for a future discussion. The Class 2 FBO fees, we currently have 5 fixed base operators that pay those fees, so 5 times 1,200 it's $6,000 a year. Yeah, it's 1,200 is the current fee. Okay. Yeah. And there's no CPI to that and the history we were discussing earlier. So the proposal is if we, with those same operators, and we raise it to 180, that would create $10,800 in income, an increase of about $4,800. Sponsors, miscellaneous, that should actually be removed. That's something that I think came in before my time, and it's just been carried over. Open house income is offset by expense generally, and then last year we donated the proceeds from the open house, which included the raffle for the rides in the Waco, the silent auction, the chicken wing contest fees, the vendor fees, and so we ended up donating $4,200 to the Eagle Valley Children's Home. So when you see open house income, it's really going to be offset to a zero anyway. Interest income, that is the program where we've taken our reserves and we put them in the local government investment pool that's managed by the state treasurer. And as you can see, that's increased over the last year. Primarily that's due to compounding. The interest rate has actually gone down. It fluctuates like every couple of months. It's tied to the 10-year T-bill. So the subtotal on that, The long-term parking fees, I want to just talk about that for one brief minute. The vehicle parking fees, that's a way to really manage our parking lot. If we didn't have a fee structure, you don't know whose car's who. There's no way that we track that. And so the case that Mr. Edwards mentioned about one of his tenants parking on the air side, there's like 4 parking spots there. If they have a tie down, that does create, I told him just to come into my office and tell me, and I said, hey, all this money goes back in the airfield, and he goes, well, here's your $5. So basically, that was an offset. If they have a hangar, they should be parking their vehicle in the hangar. If they come to me and let me know, then I know whose car it is, and I can treat it as such. But we want to prevent is people using our parking lot for something other than it's attended. And granted, it's a big space right now, but if activities change and we have a lot more people, that changes the dynamic. Parking at a commercial service airport is a significant amount of their revenue stream, usually in the neighborhood of 25% or so. So just for point of discussion. When we look at the expense side, the general engineering, we don't have that expense anymore. That's when Atkins would come here and they'd sit through a meeting and they get paid $500 to do that. And now our consulting engineer submits a monthly report. Memberships and registration, that's everything from the Nevada Airports Association, Southwest Association Airport Executives, Chamber of Commerce, et cetera. Registration is for conference fees, and the conferences you see there, that's usually the expenses to travel. As you know, I'm a member of the Southwest Regional Board of Directors as the legislative chair. And so when the board approved that membership and that additional duty, they authorized travel for that. I think last year I went to one board meeting, and so it wasn't reflective of what the budgeted amount was. Mileage is what I pay in my POV, and based upon a year's worth of records, I increased that a little bit. And that's not for commuting, that's all for airport business. So whenever I either go around town or have a meeting or visit another airport, then we're paying mileage for that. Marketing the website. Marketing is mostly, there's been an ad we run in the CAP magazine that we pay for. The website is the maintenance side, the back side of the website. I've tried to learn to do as much posting as I can to minimize those kind of fees. So like when the board packet gets posted and whatnot, I'm usually the one who does that. They've done some graphic design work for our open house and preparation of like the flyers and the save the date. The legal notices is really for when we have to publish a notice relating to like a budget meeting or a public hearing related to the budget or a lease or RFP or any of those things. So we do have a small amount budgeted for that. Open house expense, you can see there's the offset, and that's based kind of predicated on what we did last year as far as revenue and expenses. And then, of course, the donation is captured elsewhere. Under operating expenses, that's primarily the utilities with the building. The city, if you may have noticed, they had an increase in the stormwater fee. Mr. Barrett probably recalls when that whole discussion went, it probably brought as many members of the community out as any other meeting. So that's increased significantly. It's about $115 a month for the airport. And then there may be some additional costs for when we do our landscape in order to keep it alive. We'll have to probably use some water. We are going to do some xeriscape, and I should have a plan for the board to look at here in the next board meeting. Phone and internet, that includes cell phone as well as the office phone, the phone line for the AWAS, and electric, a little bit. We have a decrease since we did that south ramp lighting project. Not been sufficient period of time has gone by to really be able to trend that out. So I've slightly decreased it for the budget going forward. Gas is a similar thing. We replaced the old furnaces in there, and we got a little bit more higher efficiency, but we don't try to heat that room when there's nobody there. So we're trying to manage that process. And then waste management, instead of renting a dumpster, Gary generally makes a trip to the dump, which is much less expensive. So we don't generate a ton of waste. Then you get into the office management piece. Office expense, you used to carry things like software and hardware for the computer stuff, so I've separated those out so we track those more accurately. And you can see a little bit of a change then in the top line number for office expense. Meals and entertainment, that's static. I think last year the total expense was under $300. Legal, Mr. Takus fee. Secretarial, we budgeted for that for the future. I think the discussion I had with Ms. Law when she was chair was to have a part-time administrative help. I didn't want to totally zero it out, but you can see it's decreased each year. I don't anticipate whether or not we'll do that next year, if we'll have a need for that. Security is the cost of the contract as well. In that is also our, I think it's just the cost of the data storage is separate, record storage. Oh, it's for the building security. I knew there was something else up there. So it's building security as well as the patrol.
Can I interrupt for?
Yes.
Two things, Ken. And I just want to clarify, because I didn't know this after all the years, we've been on the airport. So there's a private security firm patrolling, is that correct?
It was a 5-year contract that was issued like 4 years ago. And I think that was.
I've never seen
I think
them
that
in my
was
life.
associated. I think that was associated when they had some issue with people being on the airport.
I do remember
And
that.
I
We
think-
had someone living on the airport.
Right, and I think that's going to improve with the fence project, obviously.
Okay, yeah, I would just,
So-
and I'm asking.
No, I'm
I'm
just
like-
explaining, yeah.
Yeah, I've been out at the airport as early as maybe 7 a.m. and as late as maybe 9, or actually, I can even remember one time I was out at midnight out at the FBO. I have never in my life seen anyone.
Well, that's it. We don't want anybody to see him. No.
I'm just making a general comment.
I have two. They issue a weekly report.
Okay.
And they do perimeter check, gate check. That's their primary.
And then for the sake of expediting this discussion, can you just highlight for us the items that you believe, as
Well,
you're discussing it?
Yeah, I'll go down to the higher, as you know, we do accounting with Bolus, but we also have an annual audit that's required by the NRS. So both those fees are pretty much fixed. Excuse me. Contract services, so if we go out for appraisal, we want to allocate some money for that for a land lease. The airport maintenance for the equipment, the AWAS expense, that's a contract. We've already, only reason you see that number is different from last year is that there are 3 visits per year. One of them will occur in one fiscal year and the other 2 will be in the following fiscal year. So it's more of just an accounting adjustment. Airport equipment maintenance last year was so high because we were going to lease the tractor during the year. So we put it in that category. And this year we pulled that back out. But it's been an expensive year as far as equipment maintenance is concerned, as well as airfield maintenance. A lot of signs, we've had to do some replacing on the lights. Aero tracking, that's the software program that we leased up. And remember, we put a placeholder in last year for the aero tracking company. We ended up going a different direction. And then you'll see in my report, there's a breakout of the traffic count based on the ADS-B traffic from last year. Labor expense, there's nothing been, and there's going to be an adjustment to healthcare. There's been almost every other year. So I'm just trying to account for that. We might get a better idea of that going forward. But there may be some adjustments in some of those other expenses based upon any salary adjustments for the airport staff. The uniforms, the AED, we approved the AED, and for whatever reason, I have not had that installed yet. So that was a $1,200 expense, and that's just something I've overlooked. It kind of reminded me again when we came back to the budget, and I looked at that and went, oh, yeah. But the uniform expenses in there. This is a rough part right here, the FA grant stuff. Last year, we didn't get a grant for this fiscal year that we're in currently, but we're going to get 2 grants. That's the anticipation to make up for that one. But we did have a grant project, so that expense has been carried forward. So I'm anticipating, and these are rough numbers because they're based upon engineers' estimates, and we don't have the independent VA estimate yet. But the three projects are the runway rehab, the design of the snow equipment removal building, and the perimeter fence project.
Okay, so Ken?
Yes, sir.
With this all in mind, this is only for discussion.
Right.
We're not taking any action.
Correct.
Before we discuss any of this, I just have a question for you so I understand the timing of all this. There's going to be some metamorphosis here, obviously,
Right.
of this.
We're going to firm these numbers up over the next meeting. This is just to get everybody's head wrapped around the budget process. And then by April 15th, we have to submit to the state of Nevada a tentative budget.
Okay, that's what I was looking for.
Right. And then finally, by June 1st, we have to have a public meeting within a certain window in May. It's like the last 10 days of May, no sooner than a certain date, no later than another. And then the final budget submitted for the June date.
Okay.
Ultimately, with this proposed budget, this is not including any capital investment in any capital projects. It shows the cost of financing the tractor in that separate line item, but it's a total net income of about $90,000.
Okay, so let's do this then. You gave a good presentation. I'd like to have the airport authority members have their opportunity to opine on the matter, and then members of the public, if they have any comment, we want to hear from them, and then we can wrap this up. So, Paul, any comments?
No comments.
John?
I just want to highlight how much detail, how the detail that Ken operates at. He really does have a handle on each line item in the budget, and that's a change from when I first joined the airport authority, and it's a welcome change. So the intent of the budgeting process from my standpoint is to start from the budget that Ken just presented, and then add into that budget our collective thoughts on what, if any, capital projects we want to do around the airport, and then see where, and then if that, once that decision is made, then we'll know better whether there's any immediate need for any revenue increases.
Okay. Bradley?
No comments.
No comment.
John?
Ditto.
Question? No comment here, but question for you, Ken. The airport, well, I won't say the airport, the operators on the airport, businesses, the aircraft owners, the hangar owners, generate a plethora of tax revenue. And I'm talking specifically about property and personal property tax. How much of that comes back to the airport?
Well, last year was about $260,000. So without that, we would be in the red about.
I'm talking about the taxes. Go ahead, Bradley.
Related to your question is clarifying what percentage of the tax that is taken then comes to us.
I don't have an exact number on the percentage, because what comes out of that is the school, police, fire, and all that
Right.
stuff. So it's the city portion. And I've been unable to get a formula per se, and nor has the city been able to locate a document that specifies how they determine that. But
I see that now. I see the 250. It's hidden in green up there. So now I see it.
yeah,
So,
but that's counts hangars, it counts aircraft, and it counts tools and equipment from the businesses. But as you know, that's all depreciating item. So each year that asset, if it's $100 one year, next year it might be 80, or the year after that it might be. So new stuff coming online will change the formula.
right. And this is just a, point of reference. This is, that 250,000 is a big number.
Yeah.
$250,000.
Yeah.
This is exactly why I must say again that the panacea here is to grow the customer base. As John said, you either grow or die.
Yeah, there's no disagreement about that.
Yeah.
But you have to set the foundation for when you bring new people on the airport, what the current rates and charges are, and.
Understood.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that this is a big number.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's the number to grow.
yeah, bingo. And I actually didn't even know the number until you pointed it out because I couldn't see it buried in the green.
No, and I, actually, in my opinion, I don't know if the city shares this opinion yet. I think that the land that the hangar sits on, that piece of that revenue should come back to the airport. I think right now it's the hangar itself.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the reason is, my recollection, and our council could clarify this or ratify my comment, because the airport owns the land.
No, not that land. The land, it only affect the through the fence people. So it only
the
really
through the
affect a
fence
couple.
people. I see.
But where it's gonna really come into play is the stuff that's vacant right now, the brownfield stuff to the east of Bravo. Because that's.
If anything ever happens, sir. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but right now, we would get it from the land because they have the access.
Yeah.
Yeah. the
Okay,
deeded
Paul,
access.
you wanted to say something real quick?
I guess, so in other words, we don't really know no one knows what the formula is to come up with this, and that's.
Yeah, it's basically.
That's pretty darn convenient for the city,
Now, what they
right?
do, and in their defense, what they do is they submit a detailed report that shows every aircraft that's assessed, every hangar property. So it's detailed in that manner, but they can't go, hey, it's X times Y squared minus B equals, this is your number.
How long have we been trying to get that number or that
Well,
formula?
I started this year. So-
Yeah. Okay, I don't want
But
this,
anyway, yeah,
I don't want
okay,
this
well,
turning into an
that's-
elongated discussion, but now you see why I asked the question, because I didn't know. And I knew it was something, I just didn't know
And
what.
we get an estimate in June about what that number is.
Okay,
It would be nice to be able to up that percentage.
Well, sure.
yeah, the way to do so, grow the customer base. Yes, sir.
I think you have to be careful about those kinds of statements. You're just basically saying, we want to take some of the city's money and put it in our budget. And I don't really think that's a good way for us to deal with our partner, the city. The deal on the hangar, real property tax on hangars was struck a long time ago, and it was struck by me, frankly, when I was chairman of the airport authority. And the trade-off was we had land that was off the east end of the runway, the land that's down in the dip there where the rocks are right now. And we purchased that land from a landowner, the city did, and the airport agreed to take over the payments on that land. In return, we asked for a number of things. And one of the things we asked for is the real property tax on the hangars that are getting through the fence. I think asking for the underlying real property taxes is a reach. I mean, you can ask for whatever you want to, but that was the deal that we struck. And it was a smart deal at the time because we paid off the purchase of the land. And the trade-off is we've been getting the real property taxes on the hangars ever since. So that's kind of the history of that organization. Now, we are at the point where we are renegotiating the cooperative agreement with the city because it actually ends in August of this year. Or May 31 of this year. So it's coming up even quicker than I thought. And so it is the time to try and get these things ironed out and find out what the amounts of money are. But it's hard to get the city to tell us you're going to get this much in property tax when they don't know.
Right.
When they have very rough projections, I guess is the best way to say it. The other pieces, there's two other pieces that come into this. One is the fuel flow fees and the fuel taxes. Fortunately, we straightened out the laws in Nevada so that the fuel taxes that are collected on sales of fuel come back to the airport. And then, yeah, pardon me?
I think it's only Jet A.
Yeah.
I don't think avgas is taxed.
Yeah, okay, that is one area where we never activated the ability to have a local tax on avgas. It's just a tax on Jet A, but that now comes back to the airport. It was going to the Civil Air Patrol or something like that, and the FAA told us, well, that may be good and noble, but it has to come back to the airport, not to this other organization. So we have these other revenue streams, and we can put together projections of what they are, but they're always soft. I mean, there's the precision that you would like to have, I want to figure out what exactly my crosswind is for this. You can't get that kind of precision out of these numbers. And so I hope that was responsive.
Okay. Any comments from members of the public on this, on the budget, the proposed budget? Please approach the microphone, introduce yourself.
You want to go with 3 minutes? Or?
Yeah, 3 minutes. Thanks.
That's what I do.
You're my wingman.
That's what I do.
Hi, I'm Rick Freewood again.
Hey, Rick.
I just noticed two line items that I'm curious about. One is the legal expenses seem really high, and then also the AIP expenses. I didn't understand what those were allocated for.
I can answer that question on behalf of the airport. AIP is real simple. AIP is an abbreviation for Airport Improvement Project, okay? What happens is, and this is a great deal, if we have $1 that we need to spend on a capital improvement project at the airport, and provided it's eligible for funding, the federal government gives us 94 cents out of that dollar. The remaining money is what's called the match. It's a federal grant that we receive the money through, but the airport has to come up with 6% of the cost of the project. That's the number. So it could be a complete resurfacing of the runway, for example, a very expensive project, and therefore you have what looks like a big number, but it's a much bigger number in reality because the federal government is giving us grant funding.
I saw that, but I didn't see how it was allocated. I saw the number coming in, it just says AIP expenses, but it didn't look like it was bucketed. I don't, so is that
I'll
allocated?
let Ken answer that for you.
Well, if you look at the diagram here, at the very bottom, there's this grant revenue. And it's basically offset by the grant expense. So this particular project, the runway rehab, the share of the federal government would be $225,000 and the share of the airport would be $15,000. And then the design for the snow equipment removal building be 96, the share of the airport be 64.
I get it.
The perimeter fence.
Yep, it's our match
Got it.
versus
Okay, I
project.
missed that.
And then
before.
legal expenses, our good counsel, Steve Takis, is sitting right over there.
I can address that. The legal expenses are extremely low. If the airport needs to replace me, I guarantee you they'll be much higher than this. And part of the reason for that is I donate a lot of my time. I also only charge the airport 60% of my billable rate. My law firm would prefer I not represent the airport authority. It's not as financially advantageous to me or to the law firm, but I do it because I've been involved with this airport since the airport authority was formed. I've developed relationships here that have much greater value to me than the legal fees I collect. But the short version is you're getting a bargain, the airport's getting a bargain. If they ever want to replace me, I invite them to do that.
It's gonna cost us a lot more.
I know how, I appreciate that there's discounts and everything. I'm just wondering what things get done for those kind of expenses.
Well,
That's all.
you have to understand that the airport deals with a lot of legal issues, from personnel, human resources, to the hundreds, contracts.
Leases.
We have, how many leases do we have? Like probably 300, I'm guessing?
No,
200 to
there's
300?
12 leases of big land leases. but
Okay.
we also have all the FAA guidance and stuff.
There's just
Steve
a-
earns his money.
There's a lot of work that requires legal counsel to review. Yeah.
And I'm
So-
happy to share with you copies of my bills where you can see all the detail if you ever want to
they're
see
also-
it. I mean, it's just, there's no secrets here.
Okay, any other comments from members of the public on the budget? Okay, seeing none, we're gonna wrap this discussion up. So you're gonna bring this back to us in April?
We're going to bring it back to you in February.
In February?
We're going to tighten it up, and
Okay.
then we'll have a final discussion in March to submit it. And then we can move on from there.
Okay, one suggestion, we took 2.5 hours for this one item, understandable,
Nice.
happens. Next time we have any discussion about proposed rates and fees, I would suggest we have a separate meeting or a workshop.
A special meeting, maybe?
Yeah, special meeting or a workshop, just a
The final
suggestion.
budget will be solely for the budget.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Now, this guy here is my wingman, Bradley. He covers me, and he had a really good idea. I'm gonna exercise my authority as chair of the airport authority. we're going to be discussing item number 4 next, which is the discussion to approve a lease amendment for Mountain View Community Association lease, because the applicant is here in the room tonight. I don't want to keep him waiting any longer than we have to. So, Ken, item number 4.
Thanks. As you know, Mountain View Community Association used to be formerly known as Sierra Skyway. And Sierra Skyway constructed 6 hangars on the north side of the airport at lot 219B. And you've got the certificate of occupancy and the final map just here. The certificate of occupancy was in the summer, the final map was here in the fall. And then he wants to exercise his option to return phase 2 and 3 of lot 219B back to the airport. So the final parcel ends up being about 37,000 square feet. That includes common area and the riser room for the fire equipment. And, I'm sorry, 31,792. And then the remaining part of the parcel, I'm gonna go to my exhibit here real quick, is about 60, it was a total of 93,000 square feet. And so the remaining parcel will be returned to the airport. And that's something that as far as business development is concerned, we can go out for RFP on, once we approve this lease amendment, it'll be the airport's property. The lessee is assisted the airport to bring it back to the state it was in prior to the condition it was in when it was leased. And so we have enough parcel there to either, build another 12 hangars that are similar to the ones he has constructed, or a variety of different sizes based upon that. And so being that it's a flat level parcel, there's utilities there at Bravo and Charlie, I think it's advantageous to the airport. And we put forth a lease amendment to accomplish that.
Okay. With that in mind, let me turn this over to the lessee. Dennis, do you have anything you want to add to this discussion? You don't have to. It's up to you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, members of the Airport Authority, it's been presented that,
Chairman, could I just
Yes, of
address
course.
something really quick? So this all looks fine to me, and the problem we're trying to solve is the last time we had a situation where somebody gave us back some land, we didn't reparcel it, and as a result, the assessor's office, it turned into a real mess where we ended up having to pay engineering fees to do a record of survey map, and we wanted to avoid that. So when we did the lease with Sierra Skyway, we put in there in the front end, actually, when we did the model lease, we put in the front, if you don't exercise the option, you, the tenant, needs to do these records of survey. We've incorporated that into this lease amendment, but it's still possible when we give this to the assessor, they're gonna say they want to see some changes, like maybe they wanna see it, instead of reducing it to this, it's broken into these two. We've got all the legal descriptions, we have the record of survey now, and so I think that what we would like is we'd like for you to approve this, recognizing there may be some non-substantive formatting changes that the assessor asks us for that we will ask Mr. Giangreco and the chairman to sign. So I'm just giving you that caveat because that's the problem we're trying to solve, and I want to make sure we solve the problem this time. We don't just hand a document to the assessor and they send us back and say, oh, you got to start over. This isn't going to work for us.
okay. Any comments from members of the Airport Authority? Okay, any comments from members of the public? Dennis?
It was surveyed for my lease,
Yeah.
and it's all, everything I was supposed to do, I did.
I think.
Can you come up to the microphone?
Yes.
Okay, so did I do everything I was supposed to in my lease?
I think you've done everything. I think that's all right. I think the only difference might be the assessor's office might want to say, it gets broken into these two pieces. You've already done the record of survey. We have everything that's here.
I'm just making sure I'm not gonna be incurred any more expense myself if I've done everything I'm supposed to in my lease.
Right.
That's all I'm asking.
No, I don't think you'll have to spend another penny on this.
If you do,
Okay,
we'll call you.
with that in mind, we need to approve the amendment. Is that correct, Ken? Okay. So can we have a motion or
I'll take a shot at it.
hit it?
Okay. I move to approve the lease amendment and legal description of the Mountain View Community Association lease agreement with the caveat that there may be some non-substantive changes requested by the assessor, and the board gives the authority to the manager to make those adjustments.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now, seeing that there's still members of the public here, I'm going to skip around again because I think members of the public maybe, could be wrong, going to want to have some input on the discussion of setting parameters for the development of an intermediate and long-term facility and equipment capital plan. So we're going to move to item number 3 next. So John or Ken, who wants to lead the discussion?
I'll take it off.
Okay.
Brought to the board, I think in November, a discussion about putting together a intermediate long-term capital program, and the board suggested that the treasurer and the manager meet and discuss the formula, the layout, what that might look like, what those items are, what the cost structure might be, and then how we're going to pay for that. So I put together a draft with the discussion of, and I want to call your attention to the separate document that it's included that was not part of the board packet. Let me pull that up real quick. I think this is it. There we go. And so it's broken out like our airport improvement program, and looks very similar to that. So we have projected years where we think some of this stuff should go. And I'm just going to really highlight the beginning here. The airport ops vehicle is not really the manager's vehicle per se, but for a way to identify it, it would be, we have been in the past, the airport authorities bought used equipment and end up paying for that use of used equipment over a period of time, where we're looking at having an asset that may last the airport 10, 15 years, as opposed to a shorter duration, then you end up pouring money into it. So that's looking at a new vehicle and properly equipped with lights, radios, and that sort of stuff. We haven't found the vehicle. This is a ballpark placeholder figure, and this is something we look to tighten up as we go forward. The airport gate surveillance camera system, this is really should be about the access control. And I don't want it to be confused with what the webcam is. The readers that we have currently in place are old and need to be programmed individually at each reader, and also only can contain a certain amount of data. And you can't do it from a central location. For example, somebody comes in to get a gate card, I assign them a gate card, and then that has to go to the airport staff has to go to each reader and program it, or remove a gate card. So all of that is very time consuming, and it's separate from another database, which is quote unquote the gate card database. So a new system would merge that, but also allow be able to update quickly and do it all in one manner. So that's the primary purpose behind the system, bring us into the 21st century. The dump trailer fuel bowser is equipment for use by airport staff. Instead of driving around the airport with a one loaded bucket, 1 yard bucket, and he really needs 5 yards worth of material, he can load it in a trailer, take it all at once, and be more efficient that way. The fuel bowser is a similar thing. He currently can't take the airport tractor off airport to get diesel fuel. You have to bring it back and forth in 5-gallon cans or 20-gallon cans. It's very inefficient. So we're trying to bring some efficiencies to that manner. Landscape East College Parkway, that's something we talked about in our strategic plan. That's a placeholder number, once again, waiting for a plan that we would get from a landscape architect that we take out to bid, and then we get a firm number on that. And then whether or not that's something we do in this calendar year, it's hard to say. Probably, if we don't get it going in the next few months, it'll be really difficult to do. So I'm anticipating to have something to present the board in a month. And then we would go out to bid on that, and then we get some numbers. We could determine whether that's a one-phase project or two-phase project or whatnot. So that's kind of a number for placeholder. The gutters for the terminal building, I'm not looking to put a ton of money back into the terminal building at this point. I think we've done the cosmetic things we want to do to improve it. We have, in this fiscal year, we're changing out the doors, putting in new commercial doors that are panic bars so that they're not locked from the inside. And then we have also budgeted for the window replacement from the single pane to dual pane and tempered glass. So that's, we're not looking at anything going forward on that, but the gutters will keep the water off the walkway and keep it from freezing and creating a slip fall hazard. So that's the purpose of that. That'd be both the north and the south side of the building. And then a webcam. I've had a lot of discussion, not just from being able to see the conditions on the field when I'm at my house and be able to see whether it is snowing or whatnot. This allows us to be able to do that, but also allow our tenants and users to pull up the webcam on a live stream and see what actual airport conditions are.
I don't mean to interrupt. I got to say something though about that webcam. That would be our biggest bang for the buck on this entire list. Okay? Yes, biggest bang for the buck. I know we have a webcam that, a lot of users operate out of Truckee. You can literally see real time what the weather is, and the webcam pans like 90 degrees, stops for a moment, pans another 90 degrees, stops for a little bit, and does a 360. And it keeps going that way. And you can see where the clouds are, what the real weather conditions are, what the runway surface looks like. Forget about the AWAS.
Right.
You can really tell what's going on looking at that. I've used webcams like that at other airports. Huge.
I'm not sure that's
benefit.
a solid number yet, so
Okay.
that's also a placeholder.
I'm just saying, that is
Oh, no, I think
biggest bang for the
it's a
buck.
great deal.
And that was one cam.
That's all it takes.
Well, hopefully, if you get in the right location, you want it to be serviceable, obviously, but it has a bird's eye view of the airport would be ideal. The other projects going forward, the work truck is long in the tooth. That is the flatbed vehicle that we bought from Truckee, I think, 10 years ago. That needs to be replaced. We don't think there's any real reason to replace that until we get the snow equipment removal building and a place to house it and be able to work on it. A snow blower attachment for the tractor is something else that we're looking at. And then I just recently added the vehicle ADS-B transmitter on there. That's really an out transmitter. And what that would do is, so if there's the tractor, the work truck, or Gary's on the runway, that would allow people with ADS-B to see that he's there. And I think that's a real safety enhancement to prevent inadvertent vehicle airplane incident and kind of highlight that. Because usually when he's out near the work safety area, he may be in or out of the vehicle depending on what's going on. Of course, he has a portable radio. He announces his position, but this is just a safety enhancement. This is a trend in airport operations with ADS-B to be able to see those aircraft or vehicles operating on the movement area.
What's times 3 mean?
Well, we have 3 vehicles. Not usually something you can take, so you have to mount it in the vehicle. So we're still looking at it. I'm still doing some research on that.
And just to follow up, what does ADS-B mean?
That's automatic dependent surveillance broadcast. And so it just went into effect on January 1, where if you're operating in certain airspace, it's mandatory that you have it. So Carson City is not required to have it, but if you go to Reno, you do need it. And if you go above, I think it's 10,000 feet, you have to have it. And so the trend will be that everybody will have it at some point. Kind of like autonomous vehicles, somebody's 59 Mustang might not get it, but ultimately at some point people will upgrade their equipment to get there. It'll take some time to do that.
Let me just add to that. The simplest way to think about it is a way for each aircraft to have a screen that shows the other aircraft around it on their moving map to screen. And that's how it was originally developed. It was called Project Capstone. It was done as a project in Alaska first to determine, is there a way we can assist the air traffic control community and at the same time give the pilots firsthand information on what's out there. And it was adopted by the FAA as a nationwide program. They paid to install the ADS-B transmitters and antennas, but each of us pilots had to spend money to put these radio systems into our airplanes. But it is a beautiful thing because when you're flying, if you've got flight following or you're on an instrument flight plan, you're talking to the controllers and they're telling you about things around you, but you can see exactly where they are. And sometimes they're busy and they don't tell you about things. And frequently, you will see things on the ADS-B screen that you're not seeing when you're looking out the window until you see it on the screen and then you strain, oh yeah, there is another airplane right out there. So it's an enormous safety advantage.
And put it in a vehicle, then you can see where they are in the airport. Yeah.
Sounds like a terrific idea. I never would have thought of putting something like that in a vehicle on the ground. So that's pretty cool.
And it could be a lifesaver in just one incident, and it's worth the effort.
Thank you.
The pavement resurface, we have 3 pavement items on here. One is our south parking lot, that will never be grant eligible. And then the pavement that's by the Port-a-Port T-hangers on the perimeter road, and then the pavement that goes between the fire station and the taxiway, the perimeter road. Both of those, the pavement in front of the T-hangers, the pavement in front of the firehouse are failed. That's basically gravel. And so we do need to rebuild that. And so there's a cost to that. And I pushed that out a little bit further based upon the maintenance equipment. But, that's obviously something the board could look at and decide whether or not it's something to get done sooner than later. The acreage, we talked about the airport being landlocked and in the future to be able to protect the airport for future development. I mean, we were signing leases for 30 and 50 years. Ultimately, that means that at some point down the road, that the airport could be totally locked in without available for expansion. So you'd either have to tear something down or there would be no further growth. Scottsdale Airport's a good example of that. A lot of private property that accesses through the fence onto the public roadway because there was no land available for development on the airport. So the land that's to the north of 27, to the west of Bravo, those are areas that we've talked about. I've actually taken the area that's around Bravo Taxway, I've basically discounted our ability to get that. They're actively selling that. Unless we had some sort of bond that we could issue right away or access to $5 million, then we're probably not going to end up with it. There might be some people that build on a couple lots in the near future and that would make that smaller, that if we were wise, we'd be able to acquire it. But our current reserves, we just don't have the capital to do that. The city and I have talked briefly about some sort of bonding. They're not entirely opposed to it, but you got to be able to make the payments on it. So we have to. I don't see how that would work at this current circumstance. And then if we're really looking out in the future, the terminal building is not going to be the place for if we're going to do any type of scheduled service. And as we discussed previously in our strategic plan is to look at the possibility of some sort of service between Carson City and Las Vegas, especially during the legislative season. The terminal will be wholly inadequate for servicing people on a long-term basis. And ultimately, I think it's the future home of the FBO on the airport. The current FBO is in the back 40, doesn't have the parking or the access to the highway as we do on the south end of College Parkway. So I think that would be a natural place for a private-public partnership between a future, either a current operator or something else in the future in order to use that space. So they would look at that building being removed, maybe a large corporate hangar being there as part of an overall facility. And there's several options to look at as we get to that. But I think to Treasurer Rogers' credit was if we don't put it on there, we don't look at it, we will forget it. And so to make it part of our active plan, it is part of our airport master plan. So with that being said, that's the quick overview on these. Like I say, this is a very rough draft. There's some placeholders in there. And obviously the priority level can be discussed as we move forward on any of this.
Okay. Any comments from members of the authority? Paul, you got anything to add to the discussion?
Just on the landscape for the East College Parkway, hopefully we would be able to keep that open for parking for our annual event rather than just putting trees all around there.
No,
and
the
close that
objective
off.
is to kind of do what's in place. We've looked at some bigger picture stuff, like even a traffic circle. But if a traffic circle was to be on our property, it would take up way too much of it. If there could be something worked out, because I think it would help College Parkway if there was a large traffic circle between us and the mobile home park. I mean, people come flying down there right now, and any future congestion would make it hard to get out of either one. And I don't think a light would be a great a solution, but, you know, I'm not a traffic engineer either, but I think it's something to have a dialogue with. But our objective is that the front of the south side of the airport looks presentable to the public. We've done some cleanup effort on it. It needs a facelift. We look like we're not into the same level as the state capitol, and I think that's something we need to improve.
John?
Somewhere in the reworking of the area on East College Park, could we please work with the appropriate authorities to get a sign that says airport with an arrow when you're traveling east on College Parkway so that somebody might notice that there's an airport there?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, actually, you should really go a step further. You should take off the sign that goes up Airport Road that leads into a dead end into
Right.
the Walmart. I mean, there was a time when that was the straightest path to the airport, but that sign should go away. And the sign should be one on College Parkway and in Carson Street saying the airport's that way. And maybe another one on Highway 50 on Airport Road that says, hey, the airport is that way.
No, that's a good idea.
Bradley? Okay, the only comment I have is if we're gonna do something with this, obviously, we're not tonight, just a discussion matter, but we have to figure out a way to pay for these items.
And so this is not the FAA ACIP, correct?
Correct.
Correct, because many of these projects, in fact, most of them are not AIP grant fundable.
Right.
I mean, they're not gonna pay to do our landscaping, I guarantee you that.
Yep. Now, before we close,
This was, yeah, Steve, this is written with that specific intent. We have the AIP. This is capital projects that we think the airport authority needs to consider funding and making arrangements for.
The only thing that's confusing is the title, because that's exactly the words that the FAA use, Airport Capital Improvement Plan, ACIP.
right, okay.
And so maybe we come up with slightly different word in there someplace.
Carson City Airport Capital Improvement Plan. So,
No.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm sorry, ACIP stands for Airport Capital Improvement Plan.
Yep.
And if you change it to capital C, I'm not sure that.
Yeah.
But it's just, that's what generically the FAA calls them for all of us. And we do need to submit one to them to show them what we are planning to ask for funding over the next 5 years.
We could call it the airport improvement plan.
There we go.
Now, any comments
Because it's all about
from members of the public? Anyone wish to provide us with their opinion, commentary on this at all? No. Okay. Fair enough. We're going to move on then to agenda item 1. I know we kind of took a circuitous route, but here we are.
Yeah, this is part of our airport safety program. It was kind of highlighted in our tractor incident. This is talking about the airport emergency plan. This is a draft document still, and I mean, it's in the framework where I think the Airport Authority Board can give it its blessing. We've talked to the city about it as well as, talked to the Sheriff's Department as well as the City Fire Department. And then I want to step through it with the city management people, because there are roles to be played by everybody in the community and based upon the type of emergency that we're dealing with. So an aircraft with a rough running engine obviously is not something that the city would be getting involved in. But if we do have an Alert 3 or a crash on the airfield, that would bring the community into bear depending on the severity of the incident. And so what it does is kind of give some structure to everything from a hazmat to a medical emergency. and how the parties would respond to those and what their duties and roles would look like. God forbid we have a mass casualty incident and it requires a lot of the resources from the city and the medical community in order to handle that. But by putting structure in place, this ties in with our whole process of the airport emergency addressing program, where if there's a medical emergency on the airport, we have a way to deal with that. We can ensure that the fire department can get to the appropriate hangar and complete the deal, tie the two ends together. So there's many items into it. I don't think you want me to belabor to go through it. I know that you've all had an opportunity to look at it. And so if you do have any comments for me, I did sit with Member Simmons, and we went through some items together, and I've adopted his changes for that purpose. And he looked at it from the standpoint of their own document that they've done at ClickBond and how they have their own emergency plan, so that was very helpful. It's not something that I created out of whole cloth. I mean, it's stuff that it's in the industry, and you can go on and kind of adopt portions and templates for your own purposes. And so that's what I've done with that. And there's a couple other documents that we'll be reviewing over the next few months that are similar in nature to kind of put some structure to some of the pieces of the airport. For example, the through the fence access stuff, because that's on the horizon with what's going on the property to the east of the airport. So we have to look at those sort of things and put some a structure to that. And this is part of that process.
So this has not been thoroughly vetted through the city yet, is that?
The city manager's office is my next stop on this. But it's in a position where if they have any substantive changes, we can make those as you would any revision in an ongoing plan. So what I'm really looking for is the airport authority to kind of bless the plan in its basis, and then going forward, it'll be reviewed annually.
Yeah,
and we'll be able to update it as we go
I would
forward.
recommend that before the airport authority adopt it, that we get all the agencies that need to sign off on it, signed off on it.
Well, the two primary agencies of concern were the fire and the sheriff's department. But yes, it's going to run through the city, and mainly their role. A lot of cities have their own emergency department. They do have a risk manager, but it's primarily run through the Carson City Fire Department.
Yeah.
So they're the real player in this. The piece that the city would be in is if we needed some mutual aid or assistance, whether it be a dump truck or a backhoe or something of that nature. So,
And you gotta have this.
oh yeah,
There's no question. I mean, our company has it. I'm sure, like ClickBond has it. You gotta have it. All I'm saying is it in a final format or no?
well, any more than Dennis's lease needs us to go to the assessor. I mean, I can come back to you next month with it again, but I think that the main substance is there, and that I don't anticipate anything from the city to be like, oh, of course we're not going to help you in an emergency. Why would we do that? So I don't think that'll be a problem.
How about if we approved it with the understanding that if there were any substantive changes, you would
Yes,
come back?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, sir, Paul. And Clyde, you'll go next.
In looking this, I only looked at this really from the aircraft incidents, accidents, and there's a number of different things that I think should be, clarified and improved in here. Accidents versus incident. Of course, the FAA has a way of identifying that, and I think that, we
Yeah,
should
it's based-
reference the 830 rather than just having it, what an accident versus an incident is.
Well, ultimately, the end user of this document is the airport staff and the emergency responders.
Yeah. The other thing I thought was quite interesting, that under any, whatever an emergency is, it's not really defined in here exactly, all parties listed under the emergency should be notified by the airport manager. City mayor, city street supervisor, fire chief. I mean, are you really gonna call all them?
Well, the
So-
beauty is I can delegate some of that work.
Yeah, okay, but I think that
We
The-
talked
the-
about some of
the appropriateness of the.
Right,
of-
and we
of-
talked about this a little bit before the meeting, and changing the language so that it's not a cookbook on how to do this, but rather he gets to use his judgment to say, we need to contact this person and not that. So we changed the language to be, he may contact, right? And including as examples, because in the end, when the place is on fire, and if you can get this document in your hands, it just loosens up your brain to be able to perform, right? That's the idea.
Of course, but in the last aircraft accident, aircraft goes off, landing gear collapses, goes off the end. That was an aircraft accident, and under that criteria, then we're saying we got to do way more than we need to do. All we need to really do is call the FAA.
Well, the beauty is that we get to exercise, the plan is to exercise your judgment, it's not to.
But we need to work.
Right.
Yeah, so that needs to be worked out a little bit in a little more detail. I'll be happy to work with you on that, since
Okay.
I've been through a few.
Clyde, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a couple concerns that I had. I think it's a very well-written, presented document, but to the point made, using words like may instead of have to. So do what you say and say what you do. And one of the concerns I have is I think it's every 3 years, you have, as written, you have to do all parties drill.
Ideally, yes, you'd like to be able to exercise the plan, yes.
And I think that we need to make sure we focus on making that clear to what our intent is, because if we say we're going to do it, then we should be doing it.
Right.
And it involves the participants of the sheriff and the fire department, et cetera. So all the players have to be all in as well.
And that's one of the discussions we had with both of them, is that once we've gotten through the documents to do an exercise, start with a tabletop drill and kind of walk through the plan and responses, and then ultimately work towards, exercising within the whole community.
Okay, John, did you want to say something?
My instinct is that we're a little ahead of ourselves. I mean, I think that Member Hamilton wants to get his input, and I think that we really ought to run it by the city before we bless it. So that's where I'm landing on it.
Bradley?
I think that's good advice. We'll get the maze and the possibility lists in there and that sort of thing, and come back with one we're a little more comfortable with. Plus, we can get the city to look at it, so I'm good with that.
John?
Yeah, no, the fire department emergency management situation, and the mayor is the executive member of the Board of Supervisors in concert with that emergency, and of course, obviously, the sheriff's department. So probably running it by the city manager, but I don't think it'll even ever come to the Board of Supervisors. I might be wrong about that, but yeah, one more go-round's fine.
Yeah, one quick thing, Ken.
Yep.
Page 23, hazard number 7, missing aircraft.
Who's shooting at it?
Missing?
Yeah, missing aircraft. That is something that we get a lot of. I would highly recommend on the emergency contact information, the FBO.
Yeah, you're right.
We
do
because
that.
usually the plane's on the ramp.
We do that routinely.
Oh, and
Missing, but we can't find it.
we're happy he's on the ramp. Just a recommendation. Any members of the public? Yes, Mr. Edwards, would you please come up to the microphone?
I think maybe you should talk to a lot of the FBOs, because out of all the people here and all the people that were here, I've probably been out on more of the emergencies on crashes on the airport than anybody else here.
He did. He has. His microphone's live.
So after all of this happens, who cleans it up?
Right.
There's nobody in this room that's probably cleaned up more than I have. Nobody here in this room probably has access to the equipment that I have, or the people have granted me to have. The last 4 that happened in a week and a half, I was at all 4.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the guy that cleaned them up. Everybody here doesn't really know what happens after it happens.
Right.
And it's just kind of like they run away, and then they get mad at the cleanup wasn't fast enough, I'm relying on me getting equipment to get it off. And Mr. Mays is nice enough to let us use his big forklift. Nobody else here that has access to that equipment.
Right. So what I would recommend you do, as a matter of being constructive, get with Ken between now and the next airport authority meeting, and you guys sit down and give your input to him as to what you believe needs to be in the document.
And this plan is on our website, Jess, under the meetings and agenda. It's right there, draft airport.
Or you
emergency
can have
plan.
my copy.
Just a recommendation, because that's gonna be your best way, because we're not taking action on the item tonight. So your input will be incorporated into this, so that when it comes back to us, it's in there.
Okay.
That's probably the best thing we can do. That way you have some pride of authorship in the document.
I don't want that.
Just like to know what's in it.
But I'll talk to you after the meeting. I got a couple things I'd like to say.
Okay. Fair enough. So Ken, work with the other agencies, get something that's, finalized by them. It looks like Paul has some comments for you. Maybe Jess will, Mr. Edwards, he might have some comments for you. And then incorporate what you need to do to give us a final document. And if you could also have our legal counsel review it before it comes back to us.
I think he's got some comments for me now.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, on that note, do we have an airport engineer's report this evening?
Yes.
Okay.
Just let me finish making my note here. Engineer's report is pretty brief. The one thing I do want to point out is that our engineer is leaving, not Armstrong. They're our consultant, but the engineer that worked for Armstrong is leaving. He's moving to Minnesota. So they're in the process of finding, and within their company, they have several civil engineers, airport designers, planners. So the slack will be picked up out of their Colorado office until they replace him here locally. But they are in the process of doing that. I just found that out last week. They have submitted the grant application to the FAA in December, so they're reviewing those. I'm sending out the plans for the fence project, the runway project for independent fee estimate, because it exceeds a certain dollar amount that the FAA has for that, so that they get a third or a second opinion on that. And they expect to have final design and bids in March of both of those projects. So we anticipate getting the environmental information back within the next couple of weeks, or no later than February, so that we can do the bid on that. And I was supposed to get an update from Lean Engineering tonight regarding some conversations about our nighttime estimate approach. But in my manager's report, I have a comment regarding the PAPI for runway 27, the planned approach path indicator was noted out of service. And so there's some dialogue on that and how it relates to our nighttime approach stuff that I'll cover later. So the engineer's report is pretty brief. Some work going forward and getting the 2 grants for this calendar year.
Okay, and your report, you can just roll into that?
You've probably had a chance to review it. So the PAPI piece I'll discuss real quickly. It was just notified by Flight Check out of Sacramento that they put a note on there restricting the use of the PAPI beyond 1.3 miles. And that was due to what they claim is a new software tool, and they ran some information through there and came back with a concern that they think the angle, the PAPI's set at 3 degrees right now, and they think it needs to be set higher at 3.77 degrees. And so this came about in the discussion of the nighttime approach issue. So the Seattle FAA planning folks were talking to the Sacramento folks, triggered a discussion, and they ran these numbers through the machine and came out the other end like, dope. So there's going to be more dialogue on that. Now, Paul Hanna with Lean Engineering was in Sacramento yesterday for another project and had an opportunity to go meet with the flight check manager, and his discussion is what he's going to update us on. So I'll have something I'll send out to you during the week. But there may be another option for us for mitigating the nighttime approach that may be more effective in the short term. That was something we can get sooner rather than later. And it has to do with what they call an offset PAPI. So the PAPI currently for runway 27 is aligned with the runway, as is runway 9. Now, 9 has a similar, runway 9, the west side of the airport has a similar restriction on the PAPI that the one for 27 now has, except for the additional restrictions, you can't use it at night because of the terrain. So we're already in that boat about the PAPI restriction. However, an offset PAPI would be turned, it would be a separate PAPI, there would be two of them, and it would be turned to face the approach path for the offset approach. So when Member Golden, Chair Golden earlier said that it would be nice to have an ILS and instrument landing system that's a straight-in approach, we're not going to end up with anything like that because of the severity of the terrain to the east. But we have an instrument approach that takes the aircraft to about a mile east of the airport, and then they navigate. They have to either have the airport environment in sight in order to navigate visually to the airport. This offset PAPI would line up with that approach path and provide them positive terrain guidance separation to the airport. So they're crunching some ideas on this, and there's going to be a meeting in Carson here in the next couple of weeks about that topic, and ultimately we'll probably end up in Oklahoma City where there are national offices. And if this thing gets some traction, it could be something that could be moving rather quickly, and it'd be a lot less expensive than the lead-in light system. So kind of exciting. It's kind of an unknown at this point, but it would be a big deal if this could come together. Instead of a $4 million price tag, it might be like $400,000 or something of that magnitude. So big difference. I'm going to touch on this just quickly because I'm going to allow you to go look at this at your own convenience. And this addresses the concern that, what happened to my website? Fly Carson City, where'd you go? About management of the administrative side. At a conference in Tucson last year, I met with a company called Delasoft. And they asked me in our conversation if I would be, what's going on here? Yeah, but it's not coming up. Go start, oh, never mind. It's a security warning. They asked me if I would look at a software program they're trying to develop. And it's all about managing your airport business. And so I've been working with them over the past several weeks. I don't know why it doesn't want to come up. It's not, I think it might be the security feature here at the city that's not allowing this page to load. But if you'll go back to when you get home and you got some time, go to the website and click on RevJet 360. And it may not let you walk through it unless you create a login account and go about it that way. But what it does is somebody can apply for a gate card, a fixed base operator advertising permit, a parking, overnight parking, a parking fee. It can do a lot of powerful stuff from the seat in your living room. I can approve it, and they can pay online. They can have an invoice sent to them or write a check, but it'll allow them to manage their account and remove this burden of administrative staff time. So for example, if you're going to get a gate card, you can fill out the application, submit it. It's going to ask you to upload your driver's license. It's going to ask you to upload your insurance, and then all that information will be available for me to review and approve I'll know whether or not, if they're renting it, a hangar, what the hangar is, what their airplane is, and then I can authorize and approve a gate card. All they'd have to do is come in to physically pick up the card and then get the briefing. If you were to do an advertising banner, and you could submit what the banner looks like, you can submit all your documentation, and it's all processed with minimal oversight. I could, Member Golden could submit fuel flow reports through there and do all that stuff from instead of putting it in an envelope and mailing it and then it being processed on my end. So it's really powerful, but it's in the beta test phase, and we just kind of put it up online. And so I encourage you to, if you want to look at this more, I think I'll figure out what's going on, whether or not we can do this here, and I can go through a demonstration of it, or you can get online, log an account, I can approve your account, and you can get in and look at it. So I think it's pretty impressive, and might be something that will be beneficial for not just us, but the other airports here in the future. And then we talked about the airport naming survey. We got 245 responses back out of about 480 that were sent. Yeah, it was very, had a lot of response, let's put it that way. And essentially, the graphs are in here, and it comes down to a really tough split. Question one was whether or not you think Carson Airport defined where the airport was, and that was, most people said yes, about 48%, and about 43% said no. They thought that the name Carson Airport did, Carson City Airport, and that was well over 70%. You asked about changing the name to Carson City Lake Tahoe Airport. There was 60% of the group didn't think that was a great idea. And then changing the name to Carson Tahoe didn't fare much better. And so asked to rank 1 through 4, Carson City Airport came out with the most at 48%, and 32% thought Carson Tahoe Airport. And then the remainder was split between Carson Airport and Carson City Lake Tahoe Airport. So we can chew on that for a little bit. We don't need to do anything about that tonight. And then I do have our flight report from our new software, and it covers the full year. And remember, there's going to be some gaps in this. It's not going to cover all the VFR stuff that doesn't have ADS-B primarily, or the instrument, or is not under instrument flight plans. It has a lot of data in there. You probably had a chance to flip through some of it, like the airports that are most used, the states that people go to, who our top users are, a rough estimate of the type aircraft and the most popular aircraft. By category size, very light jet was the top. The Pilatus was the most number of flights, and NDOT, ClickBond, Guardian Flight, and were our top users. NDOT was 10% of all operations under this measure. So if you incorporate all the VFR stuff, it's probably not 10%, but under the RFR stuff, they're 10% of the operations. And then there's a list that goes down to as low as 2%. And I think there's some data in there that you may find of interest. So I don't want to belabor that, but I'll turn it back to you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ken. Steve, anything to report?
I'll decline to report anything else. I do have historical information on the rates and fees. I know that was information you requested. I'm happy to provide that to you, but I think it's pretty late to be doing it tonight.
John, did you want to cover the treasurer's report or just have us read it, or?
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and guess that we don't need to see any more numbers tonight.
Okay. And I trust there's no more opinions or reports from airport authority members?
No, but I am interested in Steve's historical data, so I hope he can supply that at the next meeting.
Okay. And we have one last crack at public comment. Any members of the public who wish to speak to anything, please take a seat in front of the microphone, introduce yourself, and you have 3 minutes.
Jess Edwards, in the interest of safety and pilots, changing the name of the airport Putting Tahoe in the front of it, not a good idea, because we got Minden Tahoe, we're gonna have Carson Tahoe, we're gonna have South Lake Tahoe, we're gonna have Reno Tahoe, and we got Tahoe. Matt Bowers, which was here, was an instructor. He says normally when the radio comes on, you lose the first word in that conversation. So you people that don't fly and you're in an airplane and you got problems or you're trying to think about what you're gonna be doing, you do not need another Tahoe in the mix. It's not in the interest of safety. If you say Carson, there is no other Carson around here other than one back east and one down in Southern California. They know where you're talking. And you say, well, what frequency are you on? Are you on the right frequency or somebody else on the wrong frequency and you're listening to them? Changing the name is not in the interest of safety for the pilots. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I'll make a comment on that.
Well, hold on a second. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, my name is Fred Webb. As far as an ILS, for an ILS, you're going to need a long straight in. So the mountains to the east are going to prevent that.
I'm aware.
Have you ever flown into Kai Tak Airport when it was open in Hong Kong?
No, but I've seen the videos.
Okay, well, it's an IGS instead of an ILS, Instrument Guidance System. And so if this is the airport runway, you come in at about a 45-degree angle to about 600 feet in a 747-400. And you're looking at a big hill over here with a checkerboard. And you're flying an ILS, and then at 600 feet, you break off, and then the airplane rolls into a 30-degree bank and you land. That would be a way to do it, not the ILS, but the IGS.
Right. My point, sir, just for clarification, when I brought up ILS, was to elaborate that if the airport had certain amenities and infrastructure, it's much more palatable to users to discuss fees. I recognize as a pilot and aircraft owner of 8 aircraft that we can't have an ILS here. It's physically impossible.
Yeah. Well, the IGS is an ILS to a point, and then you break it off. So it's a way to do it.
Sure.
So
Thank
that's
you.
it. Thanks.
And Paul, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to make a comment on the radio calls. When someone's coming into Minden, I rarely hear anybody say Minden Tahoe. When they're coming into Carson, if it was Carson Tahoe, they just say Carson. They come into Truckee, they just say Truckee. Hardly anybody uses the Tahoe after that in any radio call that I've heard in a long time.
Yeah, the only airport where the word Tahoe is used.
Tahoe.
And then they say Tahoe traffic.
Tahoe traffic.
Or Lake Tahoe traffic. That's pretty much it. Okay, with that in mind, anyone want an agenda item for the next regular meeting? Send me an email. We're adjourning at 10 minutes to 9.